Lin Shi angrily grabbed his bag of supplies and left. These things are okay for now, but in a few months, they won't even be edible, he thought to himself. Before he could leave, he noticed a large poster pasted on the hall wall. It detailed the exchange list for trading supplies for contribution points, and vice versa. There were pens and paper nearby for people to copy it down. Lin Shi also grabbed some and copied a portion. A kilogram of wheat could be exchanged for 5 contribution points, and a kilogram of rice for 10. A kilogram of rebar could be exchanged for 20 contribution points. The long list clearly detailed various building materials and their point values. Below that was a list for exchanging contribution points for undamaged electrical appliances, car parts, electronic components, and wiring. But the most attractive part was the supply exchange list at the bottom. 5 contribution points for a pack of instant noodles, a steamed bun, or a smoked sausage. 10 contribution points for 5 kilograms of charcoal, a liter of diesel, or a candle. 20 contribution points for a padded jacket, a cotton blanket, or a set of winter clothes. 200 contribution points for a military flashlight or a military megaphone. 500 contribution points for residency rights in a shelter. 1,000 contribution points for a cold weapon, a military-issue engineer shovel, or a blade. 2,000 contribution points for a dagger pistol with an effective range equivalent to a close-range handgun. 3,000 contribution points for a crossbow, a specialized military crossbow of the Xia country, or a handgun. 5,000 contribution points for a gene potion that heals injuries, enhances physical constitution, and slightly accelerates the recovery of internal and external wounds. 10,000 contribution points for a gene pill that heals injuries, enhances physical constitution, and significantly accelerates the recovery of internal and external wounds. All the above supplies could be exchanged using contribution points that survivors earned through time and effort. Electronic components, in particular, could be exchanged for dozens of points each. Finding a few by luck could solve the problem of food and clothing. What surprised Lin Shi the most was finding 2 items on the list that seemed impossible to exist: the gene pill and the gene potion. His eyes lit up. Seeing these 2 items instantly reminded him of the pills and potions he had received from the Shen family. The fact that the military had this kind of medicine surprised him, but it wasn't too shocking. If the Shen family had it, the country had definitely researched and developed it too. In his previous life, Lin Shi had heard of people in the military unlocking their gene locks. What he didn't expect was that the commander of Shaw City would use these things to encourage and reward survivors. Ordinary people knew absolutely nothing about this medicine. As for healing injuries, it could indeed heal liver damage to some extent, but it was only effective for those who had already unlocked their gene locks. If an ordinary person ate it, they would only absorb a few nutrients and get a slight health boost. That wasn't even as effective as physical training. As for its ability to heal wounds, Lin Shi admitted it worked, but only for minor injuries. For severe injuries, like Shen Jinbin before, it took 6 pills just to keep him alive, and he still needed modern medical treatment to be saved. Now, if you were severely injured without modern medical equipment, eating 10 pills would still mean death. Therefore, this function was pretty much useless. Lin Shi immediately realized this was just a gimmick, like a jackpot prize, to lure people in. 10,000 contribution points? No one could possibly earn that in a short amount of time. Even if they could, it would take years. What Lin Shi really coveted was the crossbow worth 3,000 contribution points. He didn't know if the Xia country's crossbow was stronger than the interceptor crossbow from the Danta country. After all, the Xia country had a long history of using crossbows. Seeing the megaphone and flashlight, Lin Shi guessed that the Shaw City military still had a lot of well-preserved or buried military supplies that hadn't been destroyed by the electromagnetic storm. But aside from the flashlights and megaphones, the other things probably wouldn't be brought out. Lin Shi looked over the list. It was past 3 p.m. when he left the supply distribution point. About an hour later, it was getting dark. When he returned to the shelter, he heard the soldiers' megaphones dispersing the still crowded masses. The supply distribution for today will end in half an hour. Anyone who hasn't received theirs, come back tomorrow. At the same time, soldiers ran around with military megaphones to inform latecomers. Complaints and dissatisfaction echoed through the crowd. Some people standing in the back were unwilling to accept it. They quietly walked away. Lin Shi carried his bag and hadn't walked far from the Shanghai shelter when he noticed several unfriendly gazes. These guys had been staring at him since he stepped out of the shelter. This area was close to the Shanghai shelter, so there were more patrolling soldiers than elsewhere. Lin Shi sneered inwardly, but kept a straight face. After walking another 2 kilometers and passing a deserted stretch of road, those guys finally couldn't hold back and rushed out. 6 masked men split into 2 groups, blocking Lin Shi from the front and back. One masked man pointed a fruit knife at Lin Shi and said, "Kid, hand over your stuff obediently, and we'll spare your dog life." Lin Shi held up his bag, shook it, and said, "Here you go." The masked man's eyes flashed with joy. He stepped forward to grab the bag, but as he got close, Lin Shi moved swiftly, grabbed his right arm, and plunged the fruit knife into his stomach. Then, he quickly pulled the knife out and lunged at the two guys opposite him who hadn't even reacted yet. Moments later, 6 lifeless bodies lay on the cold, snow-covered ground. Ever since the Shen Jinbin incident, Lin Shi always made sure the bodies were completely dead before leaving, or he would directly store them in his spatial dimension. Since his space couldn't hold living things before, if a body could be stored, it was definitely dead as a doornail. Initially, he planned to store these guys' bodies in his space too, but for some reason, after killing these 6, he still felt like he was being watched. Yet, he couldn't pinpoint the source of this feeling. Lin Shi remained secretly vigilant, didn't use his space, confirmed they were all dead, and then got up to leave. Long after he left, a figure appeared on the snow-covered ground, holding a skull with a deformed face. If Lin Shi were still here, he would recognize it as the face of the old woman who had cut in line while receiving supplies earlier. And the person carrying the skull was none other than the strange young man who had stood in front of Lin Shi, looking harmless and docile. The young man looked in the direction Lin Shi had left, a cryptic smile forming on his face. Interesting. After leaving that stretch of road, the vague feeling of being watched finally disappeared. For safety, he carried the bag for a few more kilometers, found a secluded spot to hide, and stored the bag in his space. Lin Shi changed his clothes and took out his snowmobile. He drove off into the wind and snow. On the way back, it was already late afternoon, getting dark. Lin Shi no longer hid and drove the snowmobile directly onto the main road. On the dark streets, only the headlights of Lin Shi's snowmobile shone brightly, drawing the attention of many shivering survivors walking along the road. "Oh my God, what is that?" someone exclaimed in shock. "A snowmobile, boss. Give me a ride." Someone's eyes lit up. "Holy crap, where did Shaw City get a snowmobile?" Someone questioned their entire existence. "Are there still vehicles that can run? I'm going to look for one tomorrow." Someone else held onto a sliver of hope. Lin Shi's face was hidden beneath flour-dusted goggles, so no one could see him clearly. They could only watch his speeding figure with admiration and envy. "Are we here?" Lin Shi stored the snowmobile in his space to prevent anyone from tracking the tire tracks. He wiped away his footprints and returned to Wolong Village in the suburbs. It was nearly 7 p.m. As soon as he entered Wolong Village, Lin Shi sensed something was wrong. Ever since the extreme cold arrived, tonight was unusually quiet. The sounds of insects and birds had completely vanished, making the already silent night feel terrifyingly still. The entirety of Wolong Village was swallowed by darkness, vanishing into pitch black. In the dark, the village entrance loomed ominously like the gaping maw of a giant beast, waiting for Lin Shi to step inside. Lin Shi peered into the darkness, a vague sense of danger rising in his heart. Even though there were no survivors left in Wolong Village, tonight's threat didn't come from humans. It came from the starving wild beasts, or even origin beasts, deep in the mountains. Wolong Village was a mountain village surrounded by mountains, so the probability of encountering wild beasts or origin beasts was higher than elsewhere. Lin Shi didn't expect to encounter an origin beast mutation so soon in this life. Otherwise, he wouldn't have built his safe house in such a mountainous area. If there were many wild beasts in the mountains back then, and his space ran out of meat, he could have hunted them to restock. He took out his infrared night vision goggles from his space and put them on. In the dark night, any warm-blooded animal within a 200-meter radius would be clearly visible. He drew his weapon and approached the village road. On one side of the road were fields, and on the other were village houses. There was no wind tonight, but it was snowing. The fields were full of weeds with no structures to block the view, making observation easy. Lin Shi focused his attention on the village. He advanced cautiously, step by step. A few minutes later, he still hadn't seen anything suspicious. He could only hear the faint crunch of his own footsteps on the snow. "Am I being paranoid?" Lin Shi thought to himself. But he didn't let his guard down. It was better to be safe than sorry. A few minutes later, a red dot suddenly flashed in the infrared night vision goggles, but it disappeared behind cover in the blink of an eye. What was that? Lin Shi immediately stood up straight, on high alert. He already had a spear ready in his hand. Seeing the red light proved his premonition wasn't wrong. There really was a living creature in Wolong Village. The red light had flashed through mid-air. It definitely wasn't human. Lin Shi held his breath, staring intently at the spot where the red light had vanished. About 3 or 4 minutes later, a strange noise echoed. The red light flashed again and disappeared in the night vision goggles. This time, it was closer to him. As the seconds ticked by, Lin Shi braced himself. The moment the red light reappeared in his line of sight, he quickly took aim. Bang, a gunshot rang out. The leaping figure crashed heavily into the snow with a loud thud, but in an instant, as if nothing had happened, it quickly got up and lunged at Lin Shi. This time, Lin Shi saw clearly what it was. It was actually an ape-like creature through the infrared night vision goggles. The ape's arms looked incredibly muscular. It ran on all fours, and its hands were bigger than wash basins. This was clearly a mutated gibbon. The noise Lin Shi had heard earlier was this gibbon swinging back and forth among the buildings under construction in the village. When the gibbon closed in within 100 meters, the treasure bowl immediately sounded an alarm. Level 1 origin beast detected within 100 meters. Lin Shi wasn't afraid. Instead, he was thrilled. He put away his gun and drew his military knife. He wanted to see if he could subdue this gibbon. Although he had the intention of building an army of origin beasts, if they couldn't be tamed, his plan to use his space to simulate living creatures wouldn't work. He would use this gibbon to test if his idea was viable. Now that he had unlocked the level 2 gene lock, he could also use this level 1 gibbon to test his actual combat strength. Lin Shi's eyes flashed with battle intent. Gripping his military knife, he charged straight at the massive gibbon. Seeing that Lin Shi didn't run, the gibbon shrieked and swung its wash basin-sized hand at him. Feeling the foul, bloody stench hit his face, Lin Shi nimbly dodged and slashed his knife at the gibbon's arm. The blade pierced the flesh about an inch deep before getting tightly clamped by the gibbon's muscles, unable to go any deeper. What tough defense! His current strength was many times greater than when he first unlocked the level 1 gene lock. Yet, the wound he inflicted on this gibbon was even less than what he did to that mutated wild boar back then. The pain in its arm made the gibbon roar in anger. It raised its arm and smashed it down toward Lin Shi's head. Lin Shi immediately abandoned his military knife and leapt back to dodge. Snow exploded where he had just been standing. He had no doubt that if that blow had hit his head, his skull would have been smashed like a watermelon in his safe house. The gene lock silently activated in an instant. Lin Shi's eyes and demeanor changed. His entire body entered a profound state, power surging within him. His mind rapidly assessed the gibbon's strengths and weaknesses. Being an ape, its overall defense wasn't as strong as a wild boar's, but its two arms were incredibly powerful in both strength and defense. Its arms had clearly mutated. If he wanted to capture this gibbon, he had to attack its torso. Missing its strike, the gibbon quickly spread its arms, trying to encircle Lin Shi. Its 2-meter-long arms almost sealed off all of Lin Shi's escape routes. Another military knife appeared in Lin Shi's hand. As the gibbon closed in, he skillfully borrowed the momentum from its arm and kicked it in the shoulder. After unlocking the level 2 gene lock, his strength and speed were far beyond what a level 1 origin beast could match. His left hand grabbed the gibbon's fur to keep his balance, while his right hand drove the sharp knife down toward its neck. In a split second, the tide turned. The gibbon howled in pain. Under the precise control of the gene lock, Lin Shi's stab avoided its carotid artery but plunged deep into its neck. If he applied just a bit more force, he could slice its neck wide open. Lin Shi didn't care if the gibbon understood or not. He shouted with overwhelming aura, "Submit to me, or I'll kill you." The gibbon didn't understand his words, but all animals fear death. It understood that its life was in someone else's hands. After mutating, the gibbon was clearly smarter than normal animals. It didn't struggle in a death throw. Instead, it stopped attacking and lay still. If Lin Shi could see its eyes, he would see they were filled with terror. Lin Shi immediately tried to use his space to store it, but it wasn't as smooth as when he stored Demon King. When he tried to pull the gibbon into the space, he felt resistance. Lin Shi increased his force. He pushed the military knife a bit deeper and threatened coldly. Don't resist, time was tight. The gene lock could only stay open for 8 seconds. Once the time was up, he would be weakened. If he didn't succeed, he would have to kill the gibbon immediately. To avoid putting himself in danger, he knew wild beasts didn't understand human language. He could only release his killing intent to make it understand his meaning. If this didn't work, he'd have to think of another way next time. Lin Shi silently counted down in his head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A second later, the gibbon vanished from beneath his feet on the snow-covered ground. Lin Shi collapsed onto the snow. Success! He hurriedly sent his consciousness into the space to check. The gibbon had appeared inside. Feeling its neck still bleeding, it grabbed some dirt, smeared it on the wound, and looked around. Lin Shi withdrew his consciousness. Immediately, a wave of weakness washed over him. This time, he didn't fall to his knees but stood firmly on his 2 feet. He drew a machete and used his infrared night vision goggles to constantly scan his surroundings. Even though his body was weak, he didn't dare let his guard down. After all, he was outdoors at night. It was entirely possible for another origin beast to appear. If only Demon King were here, Lin Shi thought to himself. He hadn't brought Demon King out earlier because he was afraid the space-holding living creatures might have hidden dangers, like long-term oxygen deprivation, making it unsuitable for extended stays. Or other hazards. Lin Shi had planned to go into the mountains in a few days to find wild beasts to experiment on. Now, he could just use the gibbon to test it. Once he was sure the space could hold origin beasts long-term, he would bring Demon King with him every time he went out. With Demon King standing guard, he wouldn't have to worry about safety after deactivating his gene lock like he did now. Lin Shi rested to regain his strength and trudged back to the safe house step by step. Half an hour later, he finally returned. Hearing the door open, Demon King quickly ran over, sniffing Lin Shi suspiciously. Lin Shi habitually pet Demon King, rubbing the few short hairs that had grown back. Then he went to shower and change out of his blood-stained clothes. Taming an origin beast was a huge achievement for him. Whether he could fully utilize this origin beast like Demon King remained to be seen. After dinner, Lin Shi tried communicating with the gibbon in his space, but despite its intelligence, the wild gibbon didn't understand human language. Instead, it was startled by the sudden voice and ran around the space in a panic. Lin Shi pondered for a moment, glanced at Demon King, who was obediently watching a tutorial video, and said, "Demon King, I need you to do something." Demon King tilted its head and looked at Lin Shi. Woof! 10 minutes later, in the space of his consciousness, Lin Shi sighed as he watched a man and an ape chasing each other. The gibbon ran in front and Demon King chased behind, barking wildly. The problem was Demon King's expression. Lin Shi wanted it to be friendlier to the gibbon, but it had learned how to smile. That expression on a dog's face looked incredibly ferocious. It looked like a total creep. So communicating between different animal species isn't that easy either. Lin Shi helplessly propped his forehead. Initially, he thought that since they were both origin beasts, and Demon King was so smart, taming a gibbon wouldn't be a problem. Lin Shi realized he had been too hasty. Even though they were both mammals, it was like a foreigner who didn't know Vietnamese trying to communicate with someone who didn't know foreign languages. It was very difficult, especially since the gibbon was in an unfamiliar environment and on high alert. It was even harder for it to communicate with the suddenly appearing Demon King. Moreover, after seeing the gibbon, which was also an origin beast, Demon King seemed to unleash its instincts and became quite mischievous. Only then did Lin Shi realize he still didn't know what breed of dog Demon King was. With a thought, he summoned Demon King out of the space. Demon King came out looking unsatisfied, staring at Lin Shi as if wanting to try again. Lin Shi smiled bitterly and said, "It's new here, so it's a bit afraid of strangers. We'll try again in a few days." He observed Demon King closely. Now that its fur had been shaved short, he could distinguish its coat colors. Pointy ears, mostly grayish-black fur on its body, white on its chest and belly, and white paws. Except for its nose, nostrils, and the area around its eyes which were black, the rest was mostly white. But between its eyes and forehead, there was a streak of grayish-black fur. Although Lin Shi had never owned a dog, Demon King looked somewhat familiar. Could Demon King be Demon King? Tilted its head, its big eyes staring blankly at Lin Shi. Lin Shi immediately dismissed his guess. No way. Demon King was so well-behaved and gentle. It never destroyed anything, and it was much bigger than that breed of dog, with longer fur too. Lin Shi compared it to a picture of a dog from a movie on his computer and asked seriously, "Demon King, are you an Alaskan Malamute?" Demon King blinked and barked. Woof. Lin Shi felt relieved. The facts proved that the healing ability of origin beasts was truly powerful. When he woke up the next day, Lin Shi saw that the gibbon's wound had stopped bleeding. He picked some fruits from another planting space and fed them to the gibbon. Every time he fed it, he talked to it so it would get used to his voice. This gibbon was smarter than Lin Shi thought. Wild beasts gained increased intelligence after mutating, let alone a species that already had a higher IQ than normal animals. Knowing it couldn't escape, the gibbon quieted down and was no longer frightened by Lin Shi's sudden voice. 2 days later, the gibbon wasn't as anxious as it was at first. It could even get along with Demon King. Lin Shi rubbed his temples and summoned the happily playing Demon King out of the space. Over the past 2 days, Lin Shi had also confirmed that the space could hold living creatures for a long time without any issues. Today, he planned to go to the eastern suburbs to collect gold. 2 days ago, when he went there to scout the situation, he didn't have time to collect any. Over the past 2 days, he had checked all the jewelry stores in the outskirts in 2 other directions, collecting over 100 kilograms of gold and some other jewelry. It was just enough to upgrade the item duplication function. After the upgrade, the treasure bowl's stats were as follows. Treasure bowl. Complete spatial storage. Spatial volume can increase based on the user's origin power. Can store living creatures. Item duplication function, 765. Financial points required for upgrade, 2,480,000. The number of item duplications increased by 384, and the required financial points also doubled. This was the 8th upgrade. He took the time to duplicate every type of supply in his space, using up 15 duplications. I duplicated generators, medicine, outdoor survival gear, and winter clothing. I also duplicated plenty of coal and firewood, which were lacking. I had 750 duplications left. After telling Demon King and the gibbon to stop fighting, I stored Demon King in the space and put on my clothes to head out. It was snowing heavily today, so I wore a waterproof thermal suit. From my hat to my boots, everything was waterproof. On snowy days, if you don't wear waterproof gear, no matter how much you wear, you won't stay warm. The snow falls on you, melts on your clothes, and then freezes again, chilling you to the bone. On the street, I saw survivors walking outside with umbrellas, their feet wrapped in plastic bags to keep their shoes from getting soaked. Every few steps, they had to shake their umbrellas to knock the snow off and avoid the extra weight. The survivors on the street looked at my outfit with envy, some even with red, jealous eyes. Ever since the Shaw City military started distributing supplies, neighboring villages and counties heard the news and flocked to Shaw City. The blizzard and freezing temperatures had killed a massive number of people in this city in less than half a month. The people fleeing from the surrounding areas would just knock on doors. Once they confirmed a house was empty, they would pick the lock or break the door down. They threw the frozen corpses out onto the street, fixed the windows, and treated the place as their own. Because of this, the number of survivors in Shaw City visibly increased, but order became even more chaotic. On the main roads, they probably didn't dare make a move, but in the alleys or secluded areas, there were always a few corpses lying in the snow with their eyes wide open. Those corpses would be buried by the heavy snow overnight. No one knew how many dead bodies they had walked over in those small alleys. I picked up a few corpses whose eyes were missing, preparing to find a secluded spot to take out my snowmobile as usual. Just as I turned into a small alley, I heard someone begging for mercy not far away. This kind of situation was very common. Not wanting to get involved, I turned to leave. "I'll fight you to the death," a furious roar echoed, followed by hurried footsteps approaching me. "Keep chasing Qian, you little brat. Don't let me catch you or I'll skin you alive." Qian Liangliang, running for his life from 3 murderers, saw me like a savior. He shouted loudly, "Help robbery murder," seeing me ignore him and keep walking. A vicious glint flashed in Qian Liangliang's eyes. He reached out toward my back, intending to grab me. "Since you're leaving me to die, don't blame me for using you as a meat shield," he thought. But Lin Shi seemed to have eyes on the back of his head and dodged. Qian Liangliang missed. Stunned, but not daring to stop, he immediately tried to run away. But as soon as he took a step, he stepped on a foot. Tripped, Qian Liangliang lost his balance and face-planted into the snow. Thud. It was Lin Shi who had stuck his foot out. Lin Shi looked down at Qian Liangliang, wondering to himself if Shaw City was just too small, considering this was the 3rd time he had run into this guy. Qian Liangliang glared at Lin Shi with resentment and tried to get up and run, but that brief delay allowed the 3 men behind him to catch up. A man in a black down jacket kicked Qian Liangliang hard. Just as he got up, he was kicked back into the snow. "You little brat! Qian, run, keep running! You dared to kick me? Try kicking me again, motherfucker!" Before he could react, the man stabbed a knife into Qian Liangliang's thigh. A miserable scream rang out. "Shut up! Keep screaming and I'll kill you! Where's the food?" Qian Liangliang cried in pain, snot and tears streaming down his face. "My food was robbed 2 days ago. I really don't have anything left. Bosses otherwise. I wouldn't have been stupid enough to run out alone looking for food and get caught by you." He turned to look at Lin Shi, pointing at him with a venomous glare. "Look at how well dressed he is. His house definitely has food. I even know he keeps a dog if you butcher that dog. You guys can eat for days. I beg you, bosses. Spare me." Qian Liangliang recognized Lin Shi by his clothes as the guy walking the dog a few days ago. Because Lin Shi's outfit was unique in Shaw City, he remembered it clearly. Demon King, who was currently playing with the gibbon in the cave, probably had no idea someone was eyeing its meat. Hearing Qian Liangliang's words, the other 2 men licked their lips and approached Lin Shi with knives. Killing intent flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. He reached for his waist. Suddenly, the rhythmic sound of footsteps echoed nearby. Lin Shi paused his movement. Only well-trained soldiers could produce footsteps like that. One of the 3 thugs, clearly very experienced, hurriedly whispered, "Sit down," this kid screamed too loud earlier. "The patrol is here." He quickly helped Qian Liangliang up, shielded him from behind, and kicked snow over the blood on the ground. Another thug pressed a knife against Qian Liangliang's back, warning, Don't say a word later. If we get discovered, I'll kill you first if you cooperate. I'll spare your life. Qian Liangliang nodded repeatedly. The remaining thug threatened Lin Shi, dare to call for help, and I'll kill you first. The three thugs quickly got into formation. Moments later, a squad of soldiers arrived to check the situation. The man holding Qian Liangliang looked apologetically at the commanding officer. The five of us are out looking for relief supplies. My brother here just slipped and fell, so he yelled, "I'm really sorry." Qian Liangliang was tightly controlled from behind. He tried to turn his head to signal, but feeling the knife pierce his clothes, he didn't dare move a muscle. The other two thugs also tried to look harmless. The commanding officer looked at them suspiciously, seeing Lin Shi dressed differently. He asked, "Is that so?" Obviously, these soldiers knew the current situation in Sha City. Hearing this, the three thugs broke out in a cold sweat. If Sha City soldiers caught anyone looting, they would immediately arrest them and send them to the nearest police station. The nearby police stations were reportedly packed these days. If anyone thought the police stations now were like before the apocalypse, offering free food and lodging, they were dead wrong. If caught, you'd be locked in a cell with dozens of people, with no food and no blankets. Cramming dozens of people together meant you wouldn't freeze to death, but the filth, stench, and constant starvation, not knowing how long you'd be locked up, that torment was truly terrifying. Of course, you could resist, but the consequence was death. Murderers would be beaten to death on the spot. The three thugs stared daggers at Lin Shi. Qian Liangliang, hidden behind one of the thugs, looked ecstatic, cheering inwardly. "You bastard, make your move then, I'll be saved too." Just when everyone thought Lin Shi would call for help, Lin Shi glanced at Qian Liangliang. Because of where he stood, he clearly saw Qian Liangliang's joyful expression. He shook his head at the soldier. "I'm not being kidnapped." Qian Liangliang's joyful expression froze, replaced by disbelief. The three thugs were surprised, but also breathed a sigh of relief. At that moment, another cry for help rang out from the street. Someone shouted, "Help!" The leading officer frowned, ignored the five slightly suspicious men, and quickly led his squad away. After the soldiers left, the three thugs returned to their vicious demeanor. One of them, glaring at Lin Shi like a mortal enemy, said to Qian Liangliang, "Take off your clothes and shoes." Qian Liangliang initially thought he was dead for sure after missing the chance to ask the soldiers for help. Seeing that the three men really intended to spare him, he ignored the cold and quickly stripped off his clothes and shoes. He was certain that even the first time he got into bed with someone, he hadn't undressed this fast. As he undressed, he looked at Lin Shi with a malicious gaze, mouthing the words, "Serves you right." Another thug said to Lin Shi, "Kid, see that? We're smart and ain't afraid to die. Your performance just now wasn't bad. Hand over your clothes, hat, and shoes," he sneered, "and bring us your dog." But before he could finish, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. The rest of his words would never be spoken. Qian Liangliang was looking down, taking off his clothes, when he suddenly heard the sound of heavy objects falling into the snow beside him. He turned his head, and the sight before him was etched into his memory forever. The three thugs who were so fierce just moments ago were now sprawled on the ground. Their bodies and heads were permanently separated. Their faces still bore that vicious expression, as if they hadn't even realized they were dead. Qian Liangliang instantly understood. He finally knew why Lin Shi hadn't asked the soldiers for help, because it simply wasn't necessary. Meeting Lin Shi's cold gaze, Qian Liangliang didn't even finish taking off his pants before dropping to his knees in the snow, kowtowing. "Boss, spare my life, boss, spare my life." Lin Shi, of course, wouldn't spare someone who dared to plot against him. The blade in his hand swung swiftly toward Qian Liangliang's neck. At the same time, as if sensing impending death, Qian Liangliang suddenly blurted out, "Boss, I know a place with a lot of gold." Lin Shi stopped his hand. The blade now rested against Qian Liangliang's neck. He narrowed his eyes, glaring at Qian Liangliang with chilling, killing intent. "How do you know I need gold? Boss, everyone around here knows about you bringing that big dog to raid the jewelry store and kill that monster." "Heh, I just heard people talking about it." Qian Liangliang forced a smile, cold sweat pouring down his forehead and quickly freezing into frost. Soon, his head was covered in a layer of white frost like snow. Lin Shi asked, "You know a place with a lot of gold?" I know I used to work at a company, and my boss, he had a habit of buying gold." Besides, Qian Liangliang hesitated. Lin Shi impatiently cut him off. "Are you kidding me? How much gold can one person buy? Does he have more than a jewelry store?" Remembering his life was in this man's hands, Qian Liangliang hurriedly said, No, wait, it's not just a little. It's a lot. I heard many people brought gold to him. He's my superior. He sneaked a glance at Lin Shi. He shouldn't have said this, but in these times, no matter what he said, he was about to lose his life anyway. Who cared about revenge anymore? Seeing Lin Shi actually retract his killing intent, Qian Liangliang knew his life was temporarily safe. Where? Lin Shi asked. He still needed to collect nearly 2 tons of gold. Originally, after finishing his collection in the eastern suburbs today, he planned to check out other cities, but he had never been to those cities, and the collection speed would be much slower than in Sha City. If he could speed it up, that would be great. Qian Liangliang rolled his eyes and smiled. Hey, boss. If I tell you, will I die? I'm not that stupid. All right, I'll take you there. You get the gold, then let me go. Deal? Lin Shi sheathed his blade and adjusted his clothes. Lead the way. Watching Qian Liangliang hurriedly put his clothes back on, Lin Shi's voice was bone-chilling. If the gold I need isn't there, I'll make you regret living even a second longer in this world. Having survived 8 years in the apocalypse, he knew a few ways to make someone wish for death in the freezing cold. Qian Liangliang shivered, glancing at the 3 people around him who had already frozen solid. He repeatedly said, I absolutely wouldn't dare. After Qian Liangliang was fully dressed, Lin Shi used his backpack as cover and took out a golf ball from his space. This was something he had scavenged from a shipping container at the port, which included a container full of sporting goods. He tossed the golf ball to Qian Liangliang. Qian Liangliang stared wide-eyed at Lin Shi. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes, a silent threat. It went without saying, if you make a sound, I'll kill you. A ball this size stuffed in the mouth was just enough to keep someone from speaking. Qian Liangliang had no choice but to put it in his mouth and put on the mask Lin Shi handed him. From the outside, nothing looked unusual. Qian Liangliang had originally planned to look for a chance to escape on the way, but now he just wanted to scream motherfucker though. He didn't know if he even should. 2 hours later, Lin Shi and Qian Liangliang arrived near the eastern suburbs villa district. Qian Liangliang was almost in despair. Lin Shi was on high alert, giving him absolutely no chance to escape. The entire villa district looked lower than usual. Currently, in Sha City, low-lying first floors were uninhabitable. The heavy snow had buried Sha City under more than 3 meters of snow. The first floors were completely buried, and the average 3-story villas now only looked like 2 stories. Following Qian Liangliang's directions, the 2 arrived in front of a villa. Is this it? Lin Shi pointed at the villa door, which was barely visible, almost entirely buried. Qian Liangliang mumbled and and nodded. Looking around and seeing no one, Lin Shi grabbed Qian Liangliang, ignoring his muffled cries of fear, and tossed him onto the second-floor balcony, which was only about a meter above the snow. Then he jumped up too. Qian Liangliang landed on the balcony, dizzy. Just as he was about to get up, he saw a pair of eyes behind the balcony's glass door, a pair of bloodshot, golden eyes, staring right at him. Qian Liangliang backed away in terror, almost falling off the balcony. Seeing Lin Shi come up, he frantically pointed inside. As soon as Lin Shi got up, he saw a person lying by the floor-to-ceiling window. It was a corpse. He slid the glass door open. It wasn't locked. Inside was a bedroom with 2 corpses. One was on the bed, a middle-aged woman. The other was on the floor, a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man died with his eyes wide open, staring toward the balcony. There were obvious wounds on his body, clearly caused by someone. Qian Liangliang recognized the middle-aged man's face, pointed at him, and kept mumbling, Lin Shi told Qian Liangliang to take the golf ball out of his mouth to speak. It took Qian Liangliang a moment to get it out, then he said excitedly, this is him looking at the wiped clean traces in the room. Lin Shi frowned. Someone's already been here. What? Qian Liangliang looked at the cleaned-up traces in the room, staring at Lin Shi in horror. He was terrified Lin Shi would get angry and kill him. How about we keep looking? Maybe the gold hasn't been taken yet. Even he didn't believe his own words. How could someone who wiped the place clean leave anything valuable behind? Even though gold was useless right now, who knew if the world would return to normal one day? Qian Liangliang just wanted to pin his hopes on finding something, buying time to find a chance to escape. Lin Shi glanced at Qian Liangliang, his eyes shifting as he said, you go look, I'll watch you. Knowing his intentions were seen through, Qian Liangliang helplessly searched the room. In the villa's bedroom, clothes, blankets, and even curtains had been taken. There was nothing of value left. It was cleaner than after a flood. The more Qian Liangliang searched, the more discouraged he became, unable to stop himself from sneaking glances at Lin Shi's expression. Keep looking, or I'll kill you right now, Lin Shi urged. Qian Liangliang had no choice but to continue. Finally, when he opened a room that looked like a study, he gasped in surprise. A safe. It's still here. The safe wasn't big, but it was very heavy. Without electricity and metal cutting tools, it couldn't be broken open quickly. That was probably why the thieves hadn't taken it. Lin Shi coldly looked at the excited Qian Liangliang. Even if this is entirely filled with gold, it's not much. Hearing this, Qian Liangliang, who was just rejoicing, instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He frantically gestured to make Lin Shi believe him. There must be another place where the gold is hidden. It can't be just this. He often saw people hide money in walls on TV. Lin Shi glanced around the room and knocked on the walls. Nothing unusual. Did your boss have any weird habits or hobbies? Lin Shi asked. Weird habits or hobbies? Qian Liangliang scratched his head, thought for a moment, and suddenly remembered something. He blurted out, he liked listening to rock music. Does that count? Listening to rock music? A high-ranking middle-aged official liked rock music? Yeah, I heard that because he liked rock music. He even built a soundproof room and often invited people over to listen. But he treasured his sound system very much and never let anyone touch it. Qian Liangliang said they had found several large speakers in a room earlier. They went back to the room with the sound system. The room was luxuriously decorated, featuring a large screen flanked by 6 massive, uniquely designed speakers. Opposite them was a genuine leather sofa. Lin Shi suspected there was gold in this room. He ordered Qian Liangliang to tear the sofa apart to check. Qian Liangliang walked toward the sofa, while Lin Shi walked toward the speakers. With speakers this big, hiding things would be easy, right? He placed his hand on a speaker and shook it slightly. The first speaker was normal. The second was also normal. But with the third, Lin Shi immediately noticed something was off. This speaker was unusually heavy, at least twice as heavy as the other two. Lin Shi immediately used his mind to connect with his space, sending his consciousness into the speaker. Sure enough, he found gold. And they were all perfectly square gold bars. The size of these gold bars was almost identical to the ones Lin Shi had bought at the bank before. Each bar was probably about 10 kilograms, and there were about 10 bars in this speaker. He placed his hand on another speaker and casually asked, "How many years has your boss worked at his unit?" "I heard he's been there for 20 or 30 years, Qian Liangliang replied. Lin Shi nodded. Right, there are 10 bars in this speaker too. While Lin Shi was collecting the gold, Qian Liangliang, who was tearing open the sofa, revealed a vicious expression. He reached into the upholstery and pulled out a sharp knife. He carefully approached Lin Shi, who had his back turned. The plush carpet on the floor muffled his footsteps. The closer Qian Liangliang got, the more ferocious his expression became. If it weren't for the 3 guys being there earlier, he would have already killed Lin Shi and robbed him. Unfortunately, what happened next was completely beyond his expectations. No matter how careful someone is, everyone has moments of vulnerability, like right now. Qian Liangliang imagined the scene of slitting Lin Shi's throat and the look of absolute terror and despair on Lin Shi's face. He took another step forward and slowly raised the knife. "What are you doing?" Lin Shi turned his head, his calm, unrippled gaze meeting Qian Liangliang's hideous expression. Qian Liangliang froze. He didn't expect Lin Shi to turn around, but he didn't know that Lin Shi had noticed him long ago, just waiting for him to get close to teach him one final lesson. After all, this guy was useless now. Lin Shi drew his blade with lightning speed, finishing Qian Liangliang off with a single strike. After dealing with him, he continued checking the remaining 2 speakers. Each speaker contained about 10 gold bars, plus the ones he found earlier, making nearly 40 bars in total. That was equivalent to 400 kilograms of gold. Before the apocalypse, this would have been worth over 100 million yuan. He was getting closer to his goal of upgrading the treasure bowl. Once he got home, he could upgrade it 1 level. Lin Shi couldn't help but admire this old fox, hiding it right in plain sight and even inviting people over to listen to rock music. Most people his age didn't like rock and definitely wouldn't come a second time. And no one would ever suspect those speakers held so much gold. He usually only turned on 2 speakers, or even if he turned them all on, it wouldn't matter. After all, 100 kilograms of gold was nothing compared to that massive sound system. After thoroughly checking the other areas and confirming there was nothing else, he returned to the room with the safe. Looking at its thickness, this safe was probably about 6 centimeters thick. Lin Shi decided to see if he could extract the gold from inside. From his multiple tests, pushing the limits of his remote retrieval ability, his spatial penetration capability had increased. Just in case, Lin Shi summoned Demon King from his space. "If anything gets close, let me know." Demon King immediately went into guard mode, its eyes turning red as it kept watch. Lin Shi placed his hand on the safe and connected with his space. Unlike retrieving gold from the speakers, When his consciousness penetrated the safe, the resistance was much stronger. The deeper his consciousness probed, the more Lin Shi felt a sharp pain in his temples, but it wasn't unbearable. Lin Shi frowned, focused his mind, and continued probing. Finally, success. The items in the safe were transferred into his space. Lin Shi breathed a sigh of relief. Without realizing it, his forehead was covered in sweat. Wiping it away, Lin Shi checked his haul. With a flash in his hand, some cash, 2 small gold rings, and a few pieces of jewelry appeared. These things weren't worth much, not even matching a single gold bar from the speakers, but Lin Shi didn't care. Getting 400 kilograms of gold this time was beyond his wildest expectations. Maybe I should thoroughly explore this villa district. With that thought, Lin Shi stored all the wooden furniture in the villa into his space. Wood was used for burning. Many people still hadn't realized its value, but who knew how long it would be before they did? Along with some pots and pans, as long as he found it useful, he took it all. Let's go. Lin Shi swept the villa clean, recalled Demon King, and left via the balcony, landing softly on the ground. Seeing it was still early, he decided to continue searching the villa district. Whether a villa was occupied or not could be determined just by looking at the door to see if the snow had been cleared. Some villas had the snow shoveled to the sides, while others had their doors completely blocked by snow. Lin Shi looked for the villas with snow-blocked doors. Half an hour later, he found 2 more abandoned villas. One had been cleaned out completely, with no signs of a mess, looking as if the owner had packed up and left. The neighboring villa showed absolutely no signs of habitation, but still had a few pieces of furniture covered in dust. Whether he needed them or not, Lin Shi took them all first and figured it out later. After 2 rounds of searching, Lin Shi's space was packed with all sorts of items, but there was no sign of any gold. Leaving an empty villa, Lin Shi was about to go, when suddenly, a faint noise echoed from afar. Something fell into the thick snow, followed immediately by the sound of something crawling out of the snow. Lin Shi vigilantly turned his head. A young woman wearing a light yellow down jacket was crawling out of a snow pit, covered in snow. She shook herself vigorously to knock the snow off. The thick down jacket still couldn't hide her slender figure. The delicate fox fur trim on her hood fell forward, covering almost half her face. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes behind his goggles and immediately recognized her. This was the girl he had almost bumped into while riding his bike. The girl who was carefully protected by that group of people. After encountering the people returning from the port, Lin Shi was even more certain that the group he almost hit was military and not just ordinary soldiers. That guy called Uncle Q. At the time, Lin Shi only felt he was very intimidating. Now that he had unlocked the level 2 gene lock, Lin Shi understood just how strong Uncle Q was back then. His strength and reaction speed meant he was at least a powerhouse who had unlocked the level 1 gene lock. Moreover, he was a professionally trained powerhouse. To have that kind of powerhouse protecting her, this girl must be some important relative in the military. If she was here, Uncle Q was likely nearby too. Even though his current strength was no less than Uncle Q's, he didn't want to get involved in unnecessary trouble. Lin Shi turned around and walked away faster. Ever since the sudden solar storm hit, Lu Tianren had been brought by her father's men from her school to this villa. For over 10 days, she hadn't stepped foot outside. It wasn't that she didn't want to, but she couldn't. Today, taking advantage of Uncle Q's absence, Lu Tianren finally managed to slip past the guards and run out of the villa. But she found everything surrounded by white snow. She had absolutely no idea where the exit to this villa district was. At that moment, Tianren turned her head and saw Lin Shi walking quickly away from the area. Lin Shi felt someone following him. He stopped, turned to look at Lu Tianren, frowned behind his goggles and asked, "Why are you following me?" The last time he saw this girl, it was freezing. She was lightly dressed and half her face was covered by a raincoat. This time, he didn't even show his eyes and was wearing much more than before. So, even by guessing his silhouette, this girl couldn't possibly recognize him. Lin Shi was suspicious. He looked around a few times but didn't see any sign of Uncle Q. Lu Tianren caught up to Lin Shi, panting. Seeing Lin Shi taking his anger out on her, she said angrily, "Is this your road? Who says I'm following you?" That tone made Lin Shi frown even deeper. He didn't want to waste words and warned, "Follow me again, and I'll kill you." Lu Tianren's eyes widened. No one had ever dared speak to her like that. "I'm going to follow you if you have the guts. Try touching me. My dad is the most powerful man in Sha City. I'll tell him and make sure a freak like you never lives in peace." Lu Tianren felt that she just wanted to leave this villa district, yet it provoked such a strong reaction from Lin Shi, which made her incredibly angry. Because she had been locked in the villa for over 10 days, she had no idea how drastically the outside world had changed. Let alone Lin Shi, even other people wouldn't let a stranger follow them. Moreover, if it weren't for Lin Shi, someone would have already made a move on a young girl like Lu Tianrun. Freak? Lin Shi hesitated whether to deal with this girl. She had significant backing, and dealing with her would be troublesome. Lin Shi didn't want to bother with this kind of person, so he turned to leave. Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps rapidly approached from a distance. Qiu Jun had just gone to visit an old friend in the villa district. When he returned and found Lu Tianran missing, he panicked and sprinted out at top speed. He arrived beside Lu Tianran, checking to see if she was hurt, his voice anxious yet strict. "Tianran, are you okay? You silly girl. Why did you sneak out like this? Where were you going?" Lu Tianran stuck her tongue out. "Sorry, Uncle Qiu. You kept me cooped up in the villa all day. I was just too bored and wanted to come out for a walk." The other guards protecting Lu Tianran quickly ran over, surrounding her and guarding her carefully. Qiu Jun pulled Lu Tianran behind him, looking at Lin Shi warily. "Who is this?" Lu Tianran glared at Lin Shi and lied out of spite. "I was just walking when I ran into him, and he said he wanted to kill me at this moment." Lu Tianran hoped Qiu Jun would teach Lin Shi a lesson, but she didn't know this sentence had drawn the tension between the two sides as tight as a bowstring. Hearing this, Qiu Jun frowned, his killing intent directed straight at Lin Shi. The others also reached into their coats. Beneath his goggles, Lin Shi's eyes also flashed with killing intent. "Are they deliberately picking a fight with me?" Seeing the atmosphere turn sour, Tianren hurriedly pulled Qiu Jun's arm and said, a bit nervously, "It's fine, Uncle Qiu. Look, I'm perfectly fine now. Be the bigger person and let him go." But these words didn't diminish Qiu Jun's killing intent. Lu Tianran didn't know how dangerous the outside world was now, but they did. How could anyone want to harm the daughter of Sha City's commander? Even harboring killing intent was unacceptable. Hearing Lu Tianren's words, Qiu Jun and the others looked at Lin Shi with even more hostility. "Tianren, step back." Qiu Jun was confident in dealing with this kind of petty thief. He could capture him easily. With that said, he suddenly stomped hard on the snow, leaving a deep footprint. His entire body shot toward Lin Shi like an arrow. Lin Shi wasn't slow either. He quickly pulled a handgun from his space. The reason he didn't explain was that after experiencing the apocalypse, he knew explaining was useless right now. Even if the other party half believed him and couldn't reach a conclusion, they would still arrest him first, and Lin Shi could never entrust his safety to the conscience of others. The moment Qiu Jun moved, Lin Shi raised his gun, aimed right at him, and fired. At such close range, an ordinary person couldn't possibly dodge a bullet, but at that moment, Qiu Jun's tiger-like eyes widened. In an instant, his gaze became unfocused, and by a hair's breadth, he dodged the bullet. Qiu Jun's eyes were as cold as ice. His original intention was to capture Lin Shi and interrogate him before letting it go. But this young man was too dangerous, and even carried a firearm. He was clearly prepared. "Kill him on the spot," Qiu Jun gave the order while closing in on Lin Shi. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes. As the others drew their guns and cocked them, he didn't hesitate. He fired a second shot, then a third, but this time, he didn't aim at Qiu Jun, but at the 6 guards standing in front of Lu Tianran. The 6 guards couldn't dodge in time. 2 immediately fell. The remaining 4 hastily fired at Lin Shi. The moment the bullets flew toward him, Lin Shi's aura suddenly changed. The gene lock in his body activated automatically. His entire body moved at breakneck speed, easily dodging the 4 bullets. The scene was like an action movie, incredibly stunning. Seeing Lin Shi also activate his gene lock, Qiu Jun's pupils suddenly contracted. He roared, "Wait, this is a misunderstanding." He didn't expect Lin Shi to be a powerhouse who had unlocked the gene lock. Those who could unlock the gene lock were in the top 1% of humanity. If Lin Shi really wanted to kill Lu Tianran, he definitely wouldn't have let him get close to her. Hearing this, the remaining 4 also stopped firing, looking at Lin Shi in shock. They all understood what dodging that many bullets meant, but at this point, Lin Shi's blood was boiling. If he didn't strike, fine. But since he had already struck, saying it was a misunderstanding was too late. He didn't believe that the other side would have no reaction after he killed their men. Lin Shi didn't hesitate. He emptied the magazine in his hand. Without needing to aim, 3 consecutive shots took down 3 men. Qiu Jun drew his gun and aimed at Lin Shi, trying to stop him. "Stop, what just happened was a misunderstanding. Let's talk this out if you join us. We'll pretend none of this ever happened, even though Lin Shi had killed several of his subordinates. 100 ordinary subordinates couldn't compare to a genius who had unlocked the gene lock." Lin Shi sneered. He could never join any organization. Right now, his gene lock was activated. Once the duration ended, he would be at a disadvantage. Therefore, it was either he died or they died. Moreover, they were the ones who provoked him first. The killing intent radiating from Lin Shi didn't decrease. It intensified. One shot took down the last person protecting Lu Tianran. Then he pointed his gun at Lu Tianran, whose face was now pale as a sheet. "Stop!" Qiu Jun yelled frantically. With one shot, he deflected the bullet line Shi fired at Lu Tianren, then lunged at Lin Shi. Qiu Jun was already close to Lin Shi. With his speed boosted by the gene lock, and having deflected the bullet aimed at Lu Tianren, he arrived right in front of Lin Shi, preparing to subdue him first. Lin Shi dropped the empty handgun. Facing Qiu Jun's punch, he quickly blocked it. Having blocked the punch, Qiu Jun didn't think twice. His speed after activating the gene lock was much faster than natural reflexes. Even if he was about to say, even if you also unlocked the gene lock, you're no match for me. Activating the gene lock also required time to adapt and control, and he had been at stage 1 of the gene lock for 5 years. He didn't expect that Lin Shi blocking that punch wasn't the end. A ruthless expression flashed across Lin Shi's face. He exerted force in his arm, tightly gripping Qiu Jun's fist, and twisted hard. A loud crack rang out. In just an instant, Qiu Jun's punch was caught by Lin Shi, and his arm was immediately twisted into a V-shape by an immense force. Impossible. Qiu Jun's pupils dilated. His eyes looked as if he had seen a ghost. Stage 2. It's definitely stage 2 of the gene lock. Lin Shi's eyes were full of mockery. Next life, look closely before you strike. Quick as lightning, before Qiu Jun could even feel the excruciating pain of his crippled arm, Lin Shi made his next move. No. Qiu Jun wanted to explain to Lin Shi. He didn't want to face off against a genius who had independently unlocked the stage 2 gene lock. He wanted to say it was all a misunderstanding, but Lin Shi didn't give him the chance. That was, when eliminating a threat, Lin Shi never hesitated. Lin Shi grabbed Qiu Jun's neck and, without changing his expression, squeezed hard. Snap! Qiu Jun's eyes bulged in disbelief. His neck was snapped by Lin Shi. Before he died, he still stared fixedly at Lin Shi, seemingly unable to understand why he had encountered someone who independently unlocked the stage 2 gene lock and why it had turned into such a misunderstanding. The scene before her finally snapped Lu Tianren, who had been frozen in shock, back to reality. Lu Tianren's ear-piercing scream rang out. Everything happened so fast that she still thought she was dreaming. After snapping Qiu Jun's neck, Lin Shi threw his body to the ground like trash. It felt like an eternity. In reality, from the moment Qiu Jun attacked to Lin Shi's counterattack, and then to Lin Shi killing Qiu Jun, it was only a few short seconds. Actually, Lin Shi was also a bit startled inwardly. He realized that the duration of Qiu Jun's gene lock wasn't just 3 seconds. Initially, he thought that the higher the gene lock stage, the longer the duration. That thought was now discarded. It turned out that even without upgrading the gene lock stage, the duration could still be increased. He needed to study this carefully later. At this moment, the aura radiating from Lin Shi spread in all directions. Like a Rakshasa stepping out of hell, Lu Tianren never expected that just a few words from her would cause Uncle Qiu, who had taken care of her since childhood, to die tragically right before her eyes. It also caused her guards, who were like older brothers to her, to die on the spot. If this were before the apocalypse, her unreasonable and truth-twisting words would have caused a minor misunderstanding at most. Maybe it would just make someone resentful, without affecting the big picture. But she didn't know that the apocalypse had arrived and order had collapsed. Her words were like a fuse, igniting a deadly clash between two completely unrelated parties. Her mistake was that she had always been protected too well, spoiled too much, so she always spoke and acted capriciously, without considering others or the consequences. With a personality like that, in the apocalypse, she would have to pay a heavy price sooner or later. After screaming, overwhelmed by intense emotional fluctuations, Lu Tianren fainted. Besides Lin Shi, no one else was left standing. The cold wind howled, the ground covered in blood and corpses. In the freezing snow, fresh blood bloomed into bright red ice flowers. Lin Shi was fighting off the aftereffects of the gene lock. Not long after, 3 people sneaked out from the end of the road in the villa district. After observing, they quickly approached Lin Shi's battlefield. The 3 consisted of a middle-aged man and 2 young men, each holding a weapon, a machete, a short sword, and a long sword respectively. It seemed someone in this family liked collecting cold weapons. One of the young men said fearfully, "Dad, that guy is terrifying. Are we really going to get closer? What are you afraid of? He's out of bullets. Didn't you just see him throw his gun on the ground through the binoculars?" the middle-aged man said. The fearful young man's lips trembled, terror flashing in his eyes. But when I just raised the binoculars, I saw him snap someone's neck with his bare hands. Hearing this, the middle-aged man looked at his son like he was an idiot. His sharp gaze shifted to Lin Shi, who was standing motionless, and he said, "You watch too many movies. From that distance, you only caught a glimpse. You definitely saw it wrong. Look at him, standing there completely still. He definitely can't move. He must be severely injured." The older brother patted his younger brother's shoulder. Don't be scared. Times are chaotic now, much more dangerous than before. Doesn't Dad always say risk and reward are proportional? Let me tell you, when those poor, starving bastards get desperate, they'll come rob us. If we don't take care of ourselves, our neighbors will make a move on us sooner or later. This older brother clearly had a deep understanding of the sinister nature of the human heart. He continued to encourage his younger brother. We've learned martial arts. Just treat it like slaughtering a pig. Don't be scared. Once we have guns in our hands, we can still live the high life like before. Ever since the apocalypse hit, for people like them who were used to living in luxury, it was a nightmare. Not enough food, not enough warmth. Even if this hadn't happened today, they were planning to go clean out another house in a couple of days. The middle-aged man looked at his older son and nodded in satisfaction, then urged his younger son, "Hurry up, don't let anyone else beat us to it." The three of them sped up, running toward Lin Shi. The gunfight earlier had woken up quite a few people. Even those who initially hid in secret bunkers or basements of their villas sneaked out to observe the situation upon hearing the noise. Very quickly they noticed that their previously cautious neighbors had all come out. Because of this, even more people followed suit. Among them were men, women, and even two elderly people. Someone shouted, "There are a lot of guns over there instantly." These people's eyes lit up like they smelled blood. Because the distance was too far and the battle ended too quickly, they barely had time to see how the people around Lin Shi died. They only saw one person left at the scene, and a handgun dropped on the ground. Wealth is found in danger. What were they hesitating for? If no one took the lead, they probably wouldn't dare rush forward. But now that there were so many people, their courage swelled. They didn't think they'd be unluckier than anyone else and die first. "Hurry, we absolutely cannot let the Wang family get those guns." A chubby middle-aged man, seeing Lin Shi's trio getting very close, ran ahead panting and shouted, "Husband, hurry up, we can't let others get the guns first, or we'll just be waiting to die later." A woman next to him also yelled. Many people shared the same thought. Although this villa district wasn't densely populated, over 20 people rushed out. Human nature is what it is, especially when it comes to greed. It easily clouds rationality. These people already considered Lin Shi's spoils of war as their own. Lin Shi naturally noticed the commotion around him. He wasn't surprised by the crowd surrounding him. Just like before the apocalypse, if someone saw a bloody scene with corpses everywhere, they would have run far away. But in the apocalypse, the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind, was not an uncommon sight. Right now, his entire body was powerless. The after effects of the gene lock hadn't passed yet, but he wasn't alone. Lin Shi calmed down, his consciousness connecting with his space. He used his mind to speak to Demon King, the dog still chasing the ape inside. "Demon King, prepare for battle." Demon King immediately stopped chasing the ape, its dog eyes turning sharp. It seemed to understand in an instant that its master was in danger. It raised its head and let out a bark. Moments later, the father and his two sons approached Lin Shi. Seeing Lin Shi still standing motionless as they got close, the three of them felt somewhat relieved. They stared greedily at the handgun right in front of them. "All right, you go up and kill him. Dad will back you up from behind." The older brother's eyes turned cold as he took a few steps forward. Having studied martial arts for a few years, he noticed Lin Shi was unsteady on his feet, his body trembling. His eyes showed determination. The middle-aged man nodded and told his younger son to carefully circle around and grab the gun. Just as the older brother raised his blade toward Lin Shi, Demon King's massive figure suddenly appeared. In the older brother's eyes, he only saw a huge black shadow lunging at him. Before he could even see what it was clearly, his throat was bitten out. The middle-aged man and the younger son, who was about to grab the gun, finally saw it clearly. It turned out to be a ferocious dog that appeared out of nowhere. "Clear them out. Kill them all." Lin Shi's cold voice echoed from behind his mask. Hearing this, Demon King didn't hesitate to pounce, biting off one person's neck, then turning to attack the middle-aged man. Demon King raised its head and looked at those who dared to covet Lin Shi. Its gaze seemed to carry the absolute suppression of a higher-tier creature over lower-tier ones. Just seeing Demon King's bizarre eyes made everyone tremble in fear. The middle-aged man couldn't dodge in time and was pinned to the snow by Demon King. His chest was pierced by sharp claws. His son, pale with terror, watched as Demon King pulled its claws out of his father's body. Blood still dripped from the tips of its claws. He knew he was going to die. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey, trembling violently. A foul-smelling liquid leaked from his crotch. A look of disdain flashed in Demon King's eyes. It swung a paw, sending the annoying guy flying. The chubby, middle-aged man, the one who had been yelling the loudest, took the hit directly. He looked down. Half of the guy's head was smashed to a pulp. Brain matter and fresh blood spilled from the shattered skull. In just the blink of an eye, the family of three, whom he considered his rivals, had vanished. Ah, he screamed in terror, turning and running away even faster than when he came. Seeing this scene, the greed in the others' eyes vanished, and they turned and fled in all directions. Those who had run ahead were now regretting not running faster, wishing they had 4 legs. But their speed was far too slow compared to Demon King. Every swipe of Demon King's paw took a life. Its snow-white claws quickly became stained with bright red blood. Some, seeing they couldn't escape, tried to raise their weapons to resist. But that resistance was nothing to Demon King. How could humans match a ferocious beast, let alone an evolved origin beast? After killing over a dozen people, Demon King's blood-red eyes glowed even brighter. Eerie. At this moment, it seemed to revert to the time before it met Lin Shi, incredibly ferocious, without a trace of the gentle obedience it showed when by Lin Shi's side. The slaughter was almost entirely one-sided. Someone tried to take advantage of Demon King chasing others to sneak up on Lin Shi and grab the handgun on the ground. But when Demon King saw someone approaching Lin Shi, it immediately abandoned its original target and lunged over. With one swipe, the person lost half their shoulder. In its eyes, besides Lin Shi, everyone else was just a wandering wild beast. Urgh! A miserable scream was cut short as Demon King's claws slashed across his throat. After killing the person who dared approach Lin Shi, Demon King turned back to continue pursuing the rest. The one-sided massacre quickly ended. With Demon King's speed and keen sense of smell, no one escaped. They all became corpses that would never make a mistake again. Watching the scene, Lin Shi finally cracked a smile. Befriending Demon King was the best decision he ever made. The gene lock is powerful, the energy is sufficient, but the duration is too short. I must find a way to overcome this fatal weakness. Otherwise, unless it's life or death, I can't easily open the gene lock anymore. After the after effects of the gene lock subsided, Lin Shi was surprised to find that this time, the duration of the after effects was slightly shorter than the last. Lin Shi recalled the 2 times he had absorbed origin power before, a glint flashing in his eyes. Maybe with enough origin power, I can resolve the side effects of opening the gene lock. Lin Shi walked over to Lu Tianran, the instigator of all this trouble. With a flip of his hand, a military knife appeared, ready to finish off this woman. But a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. This beauty was no ordinary person. He knew he had formed a blood feud with Lu Tianran, but it was best to find out who was backing her first, lest he fall into a passive position later. Thinking this, Lin Shi decided to let her live a little longer and stored her in his space. Then, he stored all the corpses in the villa into his space, wiped away the traces, changed his clothes, recalled Demon King, and left the desolate villa district, returning to his safe house. It was already dark. As for Lu Tianran, who had been stored in the space by Lin Shi, she also woke up. As soon as she woke up, Lu Tianran found herself being stared at by a pair of eyes. Demon King's massive size, the gibbon, and the pressure from the origin beasts caused Lu Tianran to faint again. It wasn't until Lin Shi ordered Demon King to dump a bucket of ice water on her that she jolted awake. Suddenly splashed with freezing ice water from head to toe, Lu Tianran screamed in shock and sat up from the ground. As soon as she sat up, she came face to face with Demon King's ferocious visage and let out another terrified scream. "Shut up," Lin Shi's voice echoed in the space. "Make another sound and I'll kill you right now." Hearing this familiar phrase, Lu Tianran instantly recalled the scene at the villa district earlier. She shook her head frantically and said, "Don't kill me." Lin Shi sat on the sofa in his safe house, twirling a pen in his hand, and spoke into the space using his consciousness. "I ask, you answer. If you don't cooperate, I'll let my Demon King tear you to pieces." Lu Tianran was so terrified she didn't dare look up, repeatedly saying, I'll cooperate, please don't hurt me. My dad is very rich. As long as you don't hurt me, you can have whatever you want." First question, who are you? My name is Lu Tianran. I'm a college student in this city. I originally lived at then. The power suddenly went out, and Uncle Q brought me from school to that villa. Lu Tianran was completely panicked, having lost all her defenses, and answered all of Lin Shi's questions. Lin Shi continued asking, "Earlier you said your dad is the most powerful man in Sha City. Who is he?" Hearing her father mentioned, Lu Tianran's panicked face suddenly calmed down a bit, her eyes flickering. Woof! A growl right above her head made Lu Tianran jump again. She hurriedly answered, "My dad is an officer in the Sha City military." A look of realization flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. He continued, "What rank? He's a major general." Lu Tianran's eyes flickered again. Lin Shi's voice turned cold. "Liar, there is no major general surnamed Lu in the Sha City military." That day when receiving supplies, he clearly remembered the expressionless man standing in front of the crowd. Everyone called him Major General Lin. Lu Tianran was shocked that Lin Shi knew this. She quickly corrected herself. Sorry, I didn't finish. My dad is the chief of staff for that major general. Humph, Lin Shi sneered. A chief of staff is the most powerful man in Shaw City? Lu Tianran instinctively looked up to argue. My dad saved that major general's life. That relationship is completely different. Even the major general has to listen to my dad. My dad is the most powerful man. Only then did she notice she was in a strange place. What's your dad's name? Lin Shi asked. Lu Peng. My dad's name is Lu Peng. Lin Shi continued asking a few more questions, like what Lu Peng looked like and if Lu Tianran had any other relatives. Lu Tianran answered them all. But when Lin Shi asked about information regarding the gene lock in the military, Lu Tianran knew nothing. Lu Tianran had stood up by now, observing the space around her, but being stared down by Demon King, she didn't dare wander. Curiosity overcoming her fear, she asked Lin Shi, I really don't know anything about the gene lock. Where is this? Who are you? Can you let me go? You can ask my dad for money. Whatever you want, my dad will definitely give it to you. She hid her hands under her slightly dirty coat, clenching her fists. Just wait until I get back. I'll definitely have my dad execute you by firing squad to avenge Uncle Q and the others. But she didn't know that opportunity would never come. Lin Shi didn't answer Lu Tianran. Instead, he turned to Demon King and said, Demon King, teach her a lesson. After giving the order, Lin Shi couldn't be bothered with this woman who had lost her value. He didn't want to keep her in his space, wasting food and space. As for the threat from that major general and chief of staff, Lin Shi hadn't shown his face all day, and all the witnesses at the villa district were dead. So even if the military found clues later, they wouldn't know who he was. Lin Shi took out the 400 kilograms of gold bars he collected today from his space and looked at the treasure bowl interface. Treasure bowl. Complete spatial storage. Spatial volume can increase based on the user's origin power. Can store living creatures. Item duplication function, 750. Financial points required for upgrade, 2,480,000. This was the 9th upgrade for the item duplication function. Lin Shi muttered, upgrade item duplication. A familiar golden light flashed before his eyes, and the treasure bowl interface changed. Treasure bowl. Complete spatial storage. Spatial volume can increase based on the user's origin power. Can store living creatures. Item duplication function, 1,478. Financial points required for upgrade, 8,400,000. It increased by 728 times. Lin Shi thought that 1,478 duplications would take at least 20 or 30 years to use up. He just needed to continuously duplicate his existing supplies, use the copies, and keep the originals to have infinite supplies. If this pattern continued, the next upgrade should add 1,456 duplications. However, the 10th upgrade previously had caused a mutation, not expanding the old space, but transforming the space that could only hold inanimate objects into one that could hold both living and non-living things. Therefore, Lin Shi was very much looking forward to what the 10th upgrade of the item duplication function would bring. The upgrade process only took a few minutes. When Lin Shi withdrew his consciousness back into the space, he saw that Lu Tianran was dead as a doornail. What surprised him was that Lu Tianran had been smashed to death by the gibbon. The ape's hands were covered in blood and brains. Demon King stood next to the gibbon, looking at it with an encouraging gaze. Demon King can actually command the gibbon? Lin Shi frowned in surprise. Demon King, did you tell it to do that? Lin Shi asked directly. Demon King raised its head, seemingly responding to Lin Shi. It stretched out a paw, pointed at Lu Tianran, and then barked at the gibbon. The gibbon delivered another blow to Lu Tianran's corpse. Well, that's unexpected. Lin Shi moved Lu Tianran's body into the vacuum space. Then, he let Demon King out and treated it to a lavish dinner, while also preparing a rich fruit feast for the gibbon in the space. Even though the gibbon in the space had mutated, unlike the mutated wild boar from before, it hadn't switched to eating meat. As for Demon King, it didn't seem to care about human flesh at all. To avoid trouble, Lin Shi didn't go out for the next few days, staying home to focus on cultivating the vitality art. The day after he killed Q Jun and kidnapped Lu Tianran, Lu Peng finally received news of their disappearance. The Shanghai shelter in the eastern suburbs was currently requisitioned by the military as the supply management office. What? Q Jun and the others are missing? Where is my daughter? Lu Peng, who was handling paperwork in his office, slammed the table and stood up upon hearing the report. Yes, sir. This morning, when we went to deliver supplies, we saw someone breaking into Miss Lu's villa. After apprehending the suspect, we found that Miss Lu and Officer Q were no longer in the villa. The soldier replied. He and a comrade were responsible for delivering food and daily necessities to Lu Tianran and her group every 3 days. Everyone in the Shaw City military knew how much Lu Peng doted on his daughter. As Major General Lin's chief of staff, Lu Peng had to handle a lot of daily tasks and deploy patrols, so he couldn't always stay with his daughter in the villa. But he always paid special attention to her situation. Lu Peng was a middle-aged man in his 40s. Years in the military made him look older than his actual age. He had dark skin and ordinary features, with only an unusually large, hooked nose standing out, giving him a cold aura. Gloomy. Right now, he was anxious, his thick eyebrows furrowed tightly into a V shape. "Where's the guy who broke into the villa? Have you interrogated him?" the soldier replied. "He's out in the hallway. We interrogated him on the way here. He said he came from another district, planning to scavenge for supplies in the villa. He saw no one was there, so he went in. Bring him in." Lu Peng's face was grim, his voice dripping with killing intent. There was another person in the office, also wearing a military uniform. He was younger than Lu Peng, but his relaxed sitting posture showed he wasn't Lu Peng's subordinate. If Lin Shi were here, he would recognize him as the officer he met at the port last time. Wang Chao. Seeing Lu Peng's expression, Wang Chao comforted him. "Chief of Staff Lu, don't panic. Just send people to look for her. Maybe your daughter just wanted to play and went out. Q Jun is highly skilled in martial arts, so they should be fine." Although Lu Peng was burning with anxiety, he calmed down a bit. He knew his daughter was very playful, and maybe Q Jun couldn't stop her, so he let her go out. But based on his understanding of Q Jun, if they went out normally, they wouldn't leave the villa completely empty. Now that both were missing, Lu Peng was extremely worried. Q Jun wasn't Lu Peng's subordinate, but his comrade in arms. A few years ago, the state recruited soldiers to test a new gene drug that could create super soldiers. Lu Peng was worried about the risks and didn't participate, but Q Jun signed up and became one of the first to unlock the gene lock, getting promoted 2 ranks. This time, Q Jun was assigned to protect Lu Tianran, thanks to the long-standing friendship between the two. Fortunately, Lu Peng had once saved Major General Lin, so it was easy to borrow his men. The soldier went out and soon brought in the intruder. It was a man in his 30s who immediately cried out his innocence upon entering. "Sir, I just saw. No one was there, so I went in to grab some stuff. Everyone's doing it. Now I have a 3-year-old kid and a 60-year-old mother at home. Please cut the crap answer. Whatever I ask you." Lu Peng's face darkened. After a round of interrogation, the answers were pretty much the same as what the soldiers said. The soldier asked, "Sir, how should we deal with this guy?" "Lock him up. Gather a few squads immediately and search for traces of Q Jun and the others around the villa district. Spread out check if there are any signs of a struggle in or around the villa, and see if anyone saw them leave in the past 2 days. Investigate every single clue thoroughly." "Yes, sir." If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't abandon his duties, Lu Peng would rather go himself. Right now, seeing neither the people nor their bodies made him secretly tell himself that things weren't as bad as he thought. The soldiers dragged the crying, begging man out, then gathered a few squads and quickly headed to the villa district where Lu Tianran had stayed. But despite thoroughly searching the villa district, they found absolutely no clues. Because when Lin Shi and Q Jun fought outside, Lin Shi had shoveled all the blood-stained snow into his space while cleaning up the traces. Then, he and Demon King flattened the shoveled area before leaving. Furthermore, after a night of heavy snow, even the slight imperfections in the cleanup were completely covered. Aside from discovering that almost no one had left the villa district, the soldiers found absolutely no clues. Instead, they found a few survivors hiding in basements to escape the cold and brought them back to the Shanghai shelter. Lu Peng personally interrogated these people. As a result, these people lived on the edge of the villa district and hid in their basements. They hadn't even heard the sounds of Lin Shi and Q Jun's battle that day. They had no idea what happened, let alone provide any clues. Lu Peng was about to torture these people, but Major General Lin found out, scolded him, and released them. The people released back to the villa district secretly cursed their bad luck, not knowing they had just escaped not 1, but 2 deadly disasters. A few days later, survivors in Sha City noticed that the number of soldiers patrolling the streets had suddenly doubled. Although Major General Lin scolded Lu Peng, he also knew that Lu Peng cared most about his only daughter. He proactively sent men to help him search for Lu Tianran and Qiu Jun's whereabouts. But Lu Tianran and Qiu Jun had been taken away from the villa district by Lin Shi using his space. Once out of the villa district, it was impossible for anyone to have seen them. Over the next few days, they found no clues, but instead, caught quite a few troublemakers. As for Lin Shi, he stayed peacefully in his safe house, completely unaware of the storm brewing outside because of this. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Just as Lu Tianran said, her father cared about her so much, this reaction was inevitable. At this time, Lin Shi had been cultivating the vitality art in his safe house for a whole week. For the past week, aside from going out to shovel snow on the peak of Mount An at a fixed time every day, he hadn't stepped out of the room. He focused entirely on cultivating all day, and finally, he was able to independently open the gene lock. Lin Shi, wearing a short-sleeved shirt and shorts, stood in the living room, trying to calm his mind. He felt a faint stream of origin power in his body. After 7 days of tireless practice with the vitality art, Lin Shi discovered a new source of energy within him. This energy flowed like a babbling brook through his body. It was very weak, but it brought an incredibly comfortable feeling. Lin Shi guessed it was the origin power generated by the vitality art absorbing and converting origin matter. Over the past 2 days, he tried controlling this origin power and made a shocking discovery. Open Lin Shi shouted softly, directing the origin power to spread throughout his body. The origin power seeped into his entire being. An electric shock ran up from the bottom of his heart. He seemed to hear a click inside his body, as if something had been unlocked. Instantly, he entered the gene lock state. It worked, Lin Shi muttered excitedly and dashed toward Demon King, who was hiding in the corner of the living room. Demon King tried its best to press itself into the corner, its dog face incredibly expressive. Its mouth was open, eyes wide, looking like it wanted to escape but couldn't. Its expression seemed to say, "Here we go again, don't come any closer." Lin Shi picked Demon King up, opened the safe house door like a gust of wind, and threw it out into the snow. It was minus 30 degrees Celsius outside. Lin Shi was only wearing a short-sleeved shirt and shorts, but he didn't feel cold at all. Instead, he felt a warm current flowing through his body. "Demon King, let's train." Before he finished speaking, Lin Shi lunged at Demon King, who had just stood up, covered in snow. Demon King used the rolling technique Lin Shi had taught it over the past few days to dodge his punch, then got up and counterattacked. But as soon as it moved, Lin Shi's punch, which was just a feint, was instantly pulled back. He quickly took 2 steps toward the dodging Demon King and delivered a sweeping kick. Demon King's jumping motion was interrupted, and it fell into the snow with a thud, eating a mouthful of snow. "I told you, human techniques are tricky. You have to watch your opponent's movements closely and react flexibly. Even when fighting me, you have to take it seriously. Get up, it's your turn to attack first," Lin Shi instructed. Demon King stood up blankly, glaring at Lin Shi with resentment. That look was clearly from someone who had been forced to do this many times. Lin Shi fought Demon King, while seriously guiding its attacks. 10 seconds later, the gene lock duration ended. This wasn't the first time Lin Shi had independently opened the gene lock in the past few days. It was the 6th. Ever since discovering the origin power in his body 2 days ago, he had been trying to control it and master opening the gene lock. It just wasn't successful every time. At the same time, whether it was due to opening the gene lock multiple times or the increase of origin power in his body, the duration of the gene lock was getting longer and he was no longer as powerless as before when it ended. Lin Shi believed that with a little more time, he would definitely be able to fully control this power. Seeing Lin Shi's aura suddenly weaken, Demon King's dog eyes instantly lit up. A doggy smile spread across its face, and it lunged at Lin Shi again. As if anticipating Demon King's revenge, Lin Shi dodged nimbly and said, "Training is over for today. Let's go home and eat." After the gene lock ended, Lin Shi could still move, but he was still quite weak. He ran a few steps and went inside. Demon King stayed where it was, barking angrily. "Woof, woof, woof! You have no martial ethics!" Lin Shi had to use a barbecue meal to coax the angry Demon King. 3 days ago, after tasting barbecue, Demon King developed a special fondness for it. Even raw meat was no longer appealing. Every day, it just stood by the grill, signaling to Lin Shi that it wanted barbecue. Lin Shi used large skewers to pierce pieces of meat and put them on the grill. Beef, mutton, pork belly, and even wild boar meat were skewered, radiating the delicious aroma of fat. The tantalizing scent filled the air, but after one batch, he took out a few unseasoned skewers, put them on a tray, and gave them to Demon King. For himself, Lin Shi took out some fresh lettuce leaves to wrap the grilled meat. The crisp sweetness of the lettuce, combined with the rich but not greasy mutton, every bite was incredibly satisfying. Eating too much barbecue can get heavy, so Lin Shi took a watermelon from his space, left it in the snow outside for a few seconds, and brought out a refreshing, chilled watermelon. If it weren't so cold, Lin Shi would have wanted to grill outdoors with charcoal. Meat grilled over a charcoal fire was truly the best. After lunch, Demon King licked its lips in satisfaction, then walked over and rubbed against Lin Shi's leg. Looking at it, "You want to go into the space again?" Demon King nodded. Lin Shi chuckled. Demon King acted cute every time to go back to the gibbon, but with a buddy begging him, how could he refuse? Over the past few days, the gibbon had pretty much catered to Demon King's every whim. After storing Demon King in the space, Lin Shi rested for a bit, then started preparing. Today, he planned to go deep into the mountains behind his house to see if there were any stray beasts to catch. At the Shanghai shelter. Bastards, how can you not find them? How can you not find them? Lu Peng angrily grabbed a water cup from the table and smashed it on the floor in front of the reporting soldier, his voice filled with suppressed rage. Search the entire Sha City immediately, check everywhere possible. Even if you have to turn Sha City upside down, you must find them. Yes, Chief of Staff Lu. The soldier left. Lu Peng slumped into his chair, his chest heaving violently. Day after day, there was still no news of Lu Tianren. The anxiety in his heart grew larger and larger. From last night until now, he hadn't even been able to close his eyes for a moment. So many soldiers, searching continuously for 7 days, turning Sha City upside down, and still not a single clue. No news at all. That alone spoke volumes. Lu Peng had already guessed in his heart that his daughter had likely met with disaster. Yesterday, most of the soldiers sent to search had been recalled. Everyone returned to their posts. This made the hope of finding Lu Tianren even slimmer. A look of resentment flashed in Lu Peng's eyes. Right now, he hated Lin Tianrui. That Major General Lin Tianrui is an ungrateful bastard. I saved his life, yet he refused to help me find my daughter. What a heartless, ungrateful wretch. But as long as there was a sliver of hope, Lu Peng would absolutely not give up. He had to see her alive, or see her corpse. If his daughter was dead, he would definitely kill the person who harmed her and chop them into a million pieces. Blinded by hatred, Lu Peng no longer thought about the heavy duties of the soldiers right now. They had to collect supplies, distribute them, patrol, repair usable equipment, and some even had to work as construction workers building underground shelters with the survivors. Time was tight, and the tasks were heavy. Delaying for a day would cause many survivors outside to die. Even within the military, over 10 people had already sacrificed their lives. But Lu Peng no longer cared about any of that. Right now, his mind was solely on his daughter. If he couldn't find her, he would make others be buried with her. Lu Peng's eyes turned unusually ferocious. He stood up, took a dagger from his drawer, and tucked it into his belt. He walked out the door. The guard at the door saluted Lu Peng. Lu Peng said coldly, "Where are the criminals caught a few days ago? Take me there." Over the past few days, although the soldiers hadn't found any trace of Tianren and the others, they had caught quite a few people robbing supplies and assaulting civilians on the streets. A soldier led Lu Peng, whose face was gloomy, out of the Shanghai shelter. On the balcony of a building in the Shanghai shelter, Wang Chao and a burly man stood watching Lu Peng leave. "Chief, aren't you going to rein him in?" Wang Chao watched Lu Peng become a small black dot before turning to ask Lin Tianrui. Lin Tianrui's face no longer had the stern look from when he maintained order in front of the shelter that day. He casually waved his hand and sighed. "Let him be. Lu Peng only has one daughter, left behind by his late wife. Everyone knows how important she is to him. If it were anyone else, they'd be just as frantic." After saying that, he pulled a pack of cigarettes from his coat, lit two, handed one to Wang Chao, took a drag and said, "Still no news of that girl and Q Jun?" Wang Chao took the cigarette, didn't light it, but put it in his pocket, and also sighed. "No sir, still no news at all. It's been so long. The hope of finding them isn't very high anymore." "Chief, you withdrew the troops but left your personal guards to keep searching. Why didn't you tell Lu Peng?" "What, are you afraid he'll resent me?" Lin Tianrui looked indifferent. "If we find them, I'll tell him then. If we don't, there's no need to bring it up. What kind of person am I? Everyone knows. He saved me and has worked with me for so many years. There are many things that don't need to be said." Wang Chao's eye twitched. "Chief, aren't you a bit too confident in your personal charisma?" "Yes, but he didn't dare say that out loud. He only asked, 'Do you think a lucky survivor unlocked the gene lock, clashed with Q Jun, and killed them?' I've suspected that too. Since that solar storm, 13 soldiers in the military have unlocked the gene lock. Not to mention the survivors outside, there must be some who have unlocked it too. But Q-Jun unlocked his gene lock 5 years ago. You've unlocked it too, so you know this kind of power is hard for ordinary people to adapt to in a short time. Even if an ordinary person who just unlocked the gene lock caught Q-Jun off guard, they couldn't have cleaned up the scene so perfectly." I suspect Lin Tianrui stopped there. The cigarette ash was blown away by the cold wind. He threw the butt on the ground and didn't say anything more, only instructing, "For the next few days, have Li Q take over Lu Peng's duties. Consider it giving him a few days off." "Yes, sir." Wang Chao didn't ask what Lin Tianrui suspected. Actually, he understood in his heart. An ordinary person couldn't possibly make a gene lock powerhouse and several soldiers vanish from the face of the earth. It was very likely another faction's doing. As for which faction, Wang Chao felt Lin Tianrui probably had his own judgment. Lu Peng left the Shanghai shelter and arrived at the temporary western suburbs prison. In Shaw City, after the apocalypse, anyone caught robbing property or women was thrown in here. After the soldiers asked around, the warden led Lu Peng to a recently built cell. "Sir, all the prisoners caught this week are in here. Should I open it? These people are going crazy. If we open it, they'll be hard to control," the warden said hesitantly. Lu Peng replied, "Open the door." Seeing Lu Peng's determination, the warden signaled a few guards to get ready, then opened the cell door. The stench of feces, urine, and fresh blood hit them in the face. Lu Peng frowned in disgust. Hundreds of people were crammed into a cell meant for only a dozen. They were packed tightly, sitting or standing. Those sitting were practically leaning against each other, arms intertwined, with no room to lie down. The floor was covered in piles of feces, urine, and dark blood clots. Although the freezing temperatures had frozen them and lessened the smell somewhat, it was still overwhelmingly pungent to anyone just walking in. Every prisoner had bloodshot eyes, starving to the point of wanting to eat anything. Normally, if a prisoner got too hungry, they would attack and bite each other. Killing each other was a common occurrence. The guards didn't care. They only periodically collected the corpses to dispose of them. You see, they couldn't even take care of the good people, let alone give wicked people a proper chance at rehabilitation, unless they could survive until the world returned to normal. Seeing the door open, the 10 prisoners closest to it immediately rushed forward. "Do you have food? Let me out, I'm starving to death. Kill these guards and escape. Break the door." The guards were clearly used to this. They drew their batons and smashed the first prisoner over the head. That prisoner fell to the ground, and the other 2 guards didn't hesitate either. They drew their weapons and struck, not caring if they beat them to death. Anyone who dared cause trouble was beaten to death. 2 other guards stood outside with guns ready. Only after 9 more corpses lay on the ground was the situation brought under control. Lu Peng scanned the crowd and said slowly, "Listen up. A week ago, did any of you see anyone suspicious entering the villa in the Seaview Garden district? Or did you see anyone suspicious passing by Seaview Garden Road? Whoever provides accurate and useful clues, I will get them out of here and provide plenty of food and supplies." Hearing they could leave and get food, they scrambled to speak. I know, I have a clue. I saw it." The situation turned chaotic again. Lu Peng shouted, "Shut up, line up. Tell me one by one if you dare lie to me. I'll show you the consequences despite the threat." For a chance to leave, these guys still fought to provide clues. Lu Peng listened to them all. Most of the people speaking up were lying. Truth mixed with lies. When another guy lied right to his face, Lu Peng instantly lost his temper. He drew his dagger and stabbed it straight into the man's neck. His impatient, murderous gaze swept across the entire cell. I said, "Don't lie to me. Anyone else who dares to lie dies immediately." The others who wanted to try their luck by lying instantly fell silent, not daring to speak. Just when Lu Peng thought this was a dead end, a prisoner stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, early last week, I saw 2 suspicious people heading toward the Seaview Villa." Lu Peng asked patiently, "Men or women? Any distinguishing features?" The man stammered. "They were 2 men. One was Qian Liangliang. I know him. He lives in the same building as me. The other guy I've never seen before, but he was wearing a black coat, a black hat, a mask, and goggles. He had special winter boots on. I was so jealous at the time. I looked a few extra times. They seemed to be heading toward the villa, but I didn't follow them, so I'm not entirely sure." Lu Peng's eyes flashed. He asked for more details about who Qian Liangliang was, what he did, and more specifics about the 2 men. Whether true or false, this was the only clue he had right now. Back to the station. Lu Peng immediately ordered his men to investigate Qian Liangliang. As for the guy who provided the clue, Lu Peng had no intention of keeping his promise. Why would he waste effort on a death row inmate about to die? That afternoon, Lu Peng obtained basic information about Qian Liangliang. Seeing the name of the leader of Qian Liangliang's work unit, Lu Peng stood up abruptly. He had seen this guy when Lu Tianren moved into the villa. He was a resident of that very villa district. "Gather the men and head to the Seaview Villa with me immediately." At this time, Lin Shi, wearing a light, flexible white combat suit and holding a crossbow, was carefully searching the forest. He didn't use a rifle because a crossbow was stealthier, a handgun lacked power, and an assault rifle would easily startle other animals. If it attracted a pack of beasts, he'd have to run. A crossbow was the ideal weapon for forest combat. Hunting in the forest required staying hidden and delivering a fatal strike to the prey silently. For this reason, Lin Shi even painted his crossbow white. He just didn't know if the animals in Shaw City's forests were all tropical and therefore scarce. After venturing deep for over 3 hours, Lin Shi still hadn't caught anything. Suddenly, Lin Shi stopped. Arching his back like a cat, he moved cautiously forward and to the left. A few hundred meters away, on the snow-covered ground, a clouded leopard was tearing into a deer it had dug out of the snow. This clouded leopard was even bigger than a Siberian tiger. Lin Shi was certain it had mutated, but to be absolutely sure, he had to get within 100 meters for the treasure bowl to warn him about origin beasts in range. Lin Shi approached the clouded leopard step by step. The deer under the clouded leopard's mouth clearly hadn't survived the sudden cold. When dug up, its entire body was stiff and frozen solid. Watching the clouded leopard struggle, it seemed to be hurting its teeth on the frozen meat. Taking advantage of the clouded leopard's distraction with the frozen meat, Lin Shi closed the distance to within 100 meters. The treasure bowl indeed issued a warning. Level 1 origin beast detected within 100 meters. It was an origin beast, Lin Shi smiled. The clouded leopard was already a speed-based beast. After mutating into an origin beast, its speed would increase significantly. In his previous life, High City once had a mutated cheetah. That cheetah moved invisibly, killing people without a sound. Many tried to hunt it down but failed. If I can tame this clouded leopard, it will definitely be a great asset. At this moment, the clouded leopard seemed to sense something and raised its head. Lin Shi quickly hid behind a dead tree. The dead tree provided cover, enhancing Lin Shi's camouflage. The clouded leopard didn't notice anything unusual and lowered its head to eat again. But the moment it lowered its head, a white arrow streaked across the air, viciously piercing its hind leg. Lin Shi wanted to capture the clouded leopard alive. Otherwise, he would have finished it off. The clouded leopard cried out in pain and tried to run, but the injury significantly reduced its speed. Lin Shi drew his bow and fired again. Thwack! The clouded leopard's other hind leg was also hit. The clouded leopard collapsed into the snow, unable to move. It looked easy, but that was because Lin Shi was fully equipped now. If he were still like in his previous life, just an ordinary person with only a kitchen knife or a fruit knife, he wouldn't even dare approach a wild beast, let alone an origin beast. Lin Shi put away the crossbow, drew a large machete, and quickly approached the injured clouded leopard. The clouded leopard finally saw the one who injured it, its ferocious eyes turning bloodshot. It struggled to stand up, then fell back into the snow, growling to stop Lin Shi from getting closer. The clouded leopard's cry sounded quite like a cat's meow, not intimidating at all. Lin Shi stood a meter away with his machete, his cold eyes staring straight into its eyes. "Submit to me, and I won't kill you." Meow, meow. The clouded leopard let out a threatening growl. It didn't have human intelligence, nor did it understand human language. Even with its life threatened, it remained as fierce as ever. When Lin Shi tried to get closer, the clouded leopard opened its mouth to bite. He wasn't in a hurry. If one plan failed, he had another. Lin Shi retracted his killing intent and let Demon King out. "Demon King, let's see who's fiercer." Demon King landed, heard Lin Shi's words, and a look of excitement flashed in its eyes. It bared its teeth and barked right in the clouded leopard's face. Woof! And it stepped closer to the clouded leopard, step by step. In terms of size, Demon King was far superior. In front of Demon King, the clouded leopard looked like a mere cat. The clouded leopard struggled to stand, then fell back into the snow, letting out threatening cat-like cries. Demon King stepped forward and pinned the clouded leopard's head into the snow with one paw. No matter how much the clouded leopard struggled, it couldn't escape Demon King's grasp. "Good boy," Lin Shi praised. He placed his hand on the clouded leopard, connecting with his space to store it. The clouded leopard struggled violently. For the first time, contrary to his expectations, he failed. Lin Shi looked at Demon King and said, "Teach it a lesson." Hearing this, Demon King raised its paw. When the clouded leopard opened its mouth, Demon King delivered a heavy blow to its head. The clouded leopard was smacked straight into the morning snow by Demon King, unable to get up. After facing Demon King multiple times, Lin Shi fully understood its strength. Demon King's speed might not stand out among origin beasts, but its strength was absolutely terrifying. Even though I've unlocked the level 2 gene lock, my strength is only slightly greater than a level 1 Demon King. If I took a direct hit like that, I'd definitely be dizzy too. This time, the clouded leopard completely lost its ability to resist. Lin Shi controlled his space again. A second later, the clouded leopard and Demon King vanished from the ground. "Woof woof!" Lin Shi spoke to Demon King inside the space. "Demon King, I'm leaving this clouded leopard to you. Make sure it behaves." Demon King responded with 2 excited barks. Lin Shi started preparing to head home. Taming origin beasts had to be done one by one. Most of the time, they would be locked in the space. Just like now, after locking the clouded leopard in the space, the gibbon just obediently stood by and watched Demon King torment it. If the gibbon hadn't been tamed yet, it would be a 3-way battle between the origin beasts. Building an origin beast army couldn't be rushed. On the way back, Lin Shi took a hammer from his space, chopped down dozens of dead trees along the way, and stored them in his space. The next day, Lin Shi still planned to go up the mountain to try his luck, but the weather didn't cooperate. Another blizzard hit, forcing him to stay in his safe house and practice the vitality art. This blizzard lasted for 3 days before stopping. A few hours later, Lin Shi had to go out and clear the accumulated snow on the mountain peak. Demon King also helped clear the snow. What surprised Lin Shi was that the gibbon could also follow simple hand gestures. Although not as easy to command as Demon King, it was a good start. Many trees were half buried by the snow. The situation in the city must be disastrous. Just the self-built houses in Wolong village at the foot of the mountain alone, the first floors had completely disappeared, and the second floors were more than half covered. This blizzard would reduce the number of survivors in Sha City once again. On the 4th day, the blizzard stopped, turning into light snow. Lin Shi stood at the gate, looking at the sky, patted Demon King's head, which now reached his chest, and said, "We're going out today." "Woo!" Hearing this, Demon King immediately howled with excitement. Lin Shi chuckled, interrupting Demon King's howl. "Stop howling, you'll attract real wolves later." Today, Lin Shi planned to go scavenging, and he intended to let Demon King play in the mountains by itself. Demon King stayed home all day, doing nothing but eating, sleeping, and training. Lin Shi had long noticed its excess energy. Even though there was space for Demon King to run wild, the clouded leopard had been well behaved lately. Demon King couldn't just bully that docile beast every day. Now, the clouded leopard ran whenever it saw Demon King. Over this period, Demon King's fur had fully grown back, and its body was a size larger than when they first met. Coupled with its fluffy coat, it looked incredibly majestic. With this appearance, going out on the streets would easily scare passers-by and attract too much attention. It was better to let it play in the mountains by itself. "It's getting dark, remember to come back. Don't be stubborn, and don't mess with any animal bigger than you. Use the combat techniques I taught you. Don't be hard-headed. If it snows heavily, find a place to take shelter first. No need to rush back. Don't get lost," Lin Shi instructed the overly excited Demon King. At this moment, Lin Shi inexplicably felt like an old mother telling her kid to go out and play. "Woof woof, all right, go on," Lin Shi coughed to hide his inexplicable awkwardness. Demon King paced back and forth in front of Lin Shi, waiting for his command, then ran like the wind. Lin Shi thought Demon King would run straight into the forest without looking back. Unexpectedly, after running a few dozen meters, it suddenly stopped, turned around, and looked at Lin Shi with its tail wagging. Lin Shi was surprised. A few seconds later, Demon King ran back. It rubbed against Lin Shi, lay down by his feet, and refused to leave. "What's wrong? Don't want to go play?" Lin Shi asked in surprise. Demon King looked at Lin Shi with teary eyes, lay by his feet, and rubbed against him again. That cautious look made Lin Shi suddenly understand. It was afraid he was abandoning it, so it didn't dare leave. Demon King couldn't speak, and Lin Shi didn't know what it had been through to become a stray dog before meeting him. At this moment, Lin Shi felt a surge of emotion. He crouched down and hugged Demon King. "All right, I just wanted to let you go out and play for a day. You're my best friend. I will absolutely never abandon you," Lin Shi repeatedly promised. "I'll be home before dark. I definitely won't abandon you." Only then did Demon King carefully run into the forest step by step. Lin Shi returned to his room, changed into clothes that looked like a typical survivor's, and left the safe house. He wasn't that afraid of the cold anymore. The origin power in his body recovered a few hours after being depleted. As long as he had origin power, Lin Shi didn't fear the cold. Dressing like this was just a disguise to avoid drawing attention. Of course, this only applied in Sha City, where it was minus 30 degrees. If it were the north, at minus 50, 60, or even 70 or 80 degrees, he still wouldn't be able to handle it. To hide his face, Lin Shi wore a mask. Upon entering the city, Lin Shi noticed the city had changed a lot. Not only were there far fewer survivors on the streets, but they also looked panicked. He saw a piece of paper pasted on a wall with a few people standing in front of it. Lin Shi went over to take a look. Just one glance made his pupils contract. A wanted poster. It was actually a wanted poster. More importantly, there were several portraits. One was Qian Liangliang, and the other was him when he went to the villa that day. Below that was the reward. Anyone who saw or caught the people in the pictures would be rewarded with a certain amount of supplies. The promised supplies were quite substantial. Since killing Lu Tianren and her gang, he hadn't left his house for over 10 days, so he didn't know when this wanted poster was put up. "If you don't understand, just ask," Lin Shi asked the man next to him, who was also looking at the wanted poster. "Brother, what's going on? Why is there a wanted poster?" The man looked quite kind-hearted. Seeing Lin Shi dressed even more shabbily than himself, he looked at him sympathetically and said, "Brother, are you from out of town? This wanted poster has been up for 3 days. I heard the 2 guys in the pictures killed someone important in the military, so they're wanted. The reward is tempting. I look at it every day. You should take a look too. If you manage to catch them, your whole family won't have to worry about food and drinks anymore." Hearing this, Lin Shi chuckled. "Ha ha ha, there's no surveillance or cameras these days. Finding someone is like looking for a needle in a haystack. I'm just going to look for supplies. Even if I stood right here, people wouldn't recognize me. And the other dead body on the wanted poster is lying in my space, hoping to find them to get these supplies? Keep dreaming for the rest of your life," the man sighed. "Who doesn't know that? I'm just looking for fun. Just treat it like buying a lottery ticket, dreaming of getting rich quick. In these times, just surviving is hard enough. How can we live without giving ourselves a little hope?" Lin Shi glanced at the hurried crowd on the street and asked, "Why is everyone in such a rush?" The man lowered his voice. "Isn't it because of this wanted poster? On the street, anyone wearing goggles or a black coat is suspected of being the guy who stole supplies in the eastern suburbs. Because of that, everyone has to be careful about what they wear when they go out now, to avoid being mistaken for the people on the wanted poster." Lin Shi frowned. "Good thing I didn't wear my goggles out today, otherwise it would be more trouble." He had guessed that someone behind Lu Tianran would investigate this, but he didn't expect them to make such a huge fuss. Seeing Qian Liangliang's picture on the wanted poster, he knew for sure that someone had seen him forcing Qian Liangliang to the villa. Qian Liangliang had nothing to do with this, yet he was also put on the wanted poster. It was obvious they hadn't found any solid evidence and were just convicting them based on the fact that they were seen entering the villa district. It was clear that Lu Peng would rather kill the wrong person than let the culprit go. Lin Shi and the man chatted a bit more about the situation of the survivors in recent days. As for the wanted poster, he wasn't worried at all. At worst, he just wouldn't wear that outfit anymore. The man seemed quite talkative, constantly complaining that supplies in the eastern suburbs were getting scarcer. Now they only got a little food each week, nothing else, so they had to use contribution points to exchange for things. There are no candles, so at night, we just sit in the dark. Even going to the bathroom requires care, so you don't pee outside the bowl. A few days ago, there was huge news among the survivors. The military somehow got their hands on a few excavators and are digging up the empty land in the eastern suburbs. I heard they want to build most of the shelters underground. The man also mentioned he went to sign up, but it was miserable. They said he was too skinny and weak, so they didn't take him, and the survivors lining up to register were packed tight. They mainly wanted strong young men and some engineers. There's one more thing. The man suddenly stood up secretively, pulled Lin Shi closer and whispered, "I think you're a good guy, so I'll tell you. Don't tell anyone else." Lin Shi nodded. "I heard the military is recruiting mutants. You know, people with extraordinary strength, like superheroes in movies. You know what I mean?" Lin Shi was slightly stunned, immediately realizing this person was probably talking about people who could unlock the gene lock. His eyes widened in feigned shock. The military is recruiting evolved humans? Does that mean the military has discovered ordinary people breaking their genetic limits? But breaking the genetic limit only makes you a superhero for a few seconds. He nodded in agreement and said, "Like those superheroes in Marvel?" "Exactly." The man looked at Lin Shi with an affirming gaze. "I heard that as soon as these people join the army, they're immediately commissioned as reserve officers. Not only that, but they also get permanent residency in a safer zone, a full supply of resources, and they never have to worry about food or clothing. Promotions, career advancement, it's an easy path to the top." The man went on and on about the benefits of becoming an evolved, his eyes filled with envy. Lin Shi gave a few half-hearted replies, but after getting no more useful information, he said his goodbyes. The last time he went to the Dongjiao gold shop to collect gold, he ran into Qian Liangliang and had to change his plans, ending up with nothing. He had originally planned to go back to Dongjiao today, but this wanted poster forced him to abandon that idea. He had previously worn a Moang-like costume while sweeping through the gold shops in the city. It was inevitable that people would make the connection. Someone was probably already lying in wait for him near the Dongjiao gold shop. Lin Shi turned and headed west, deciding to move up his plan to collect gold around Sha City. First stop, Liunan, the city west of Sha City. As was his habit, he found a deserted street to take out his snowmobile. On the way, Lin Shi was still thinking about the military's recruitment of the evolved. He was quite curious about the percentage of ordinary people who could break through their gene lock. Since the apocalypse began, the only ordinary person he'd met who had broken their gene lock was Xu Jin. Of course, he hadn't met many ordinary people to begin with. Lost in thought, he caught sight of a short, scrawny man walking toward him. The man wore an old knit cap and a mask, revealing only his eyes. His cotton-padded jacket was ill-fitting, looking more like a quilt draped over his body. They made eye contact, then looked away, each continuing on their own path. But just as they were about to pass each other, the man suddenly closed the distance between them. Lin Shi was ready. His hand immediately went to the military knife at his hip, his gaze turning cold. Before he could speak, the man shot him a sly look and yelled, "Help, someone's trying to rob me at knife point." Hearing the cry for help, a team of patrolling soldiers on the street immediately ran toward them. Before the soldiers arrived, Sun Tongwen glared at Lin Shi with a vicious look and whispered, "Let go of me, you piece of shit." Before the apocalypse, Sun Tongwen was a professional thief. He only went straight because the surveillance was too tight and he kept getting thrown in the station. He never expected the apocalypse would give him a chance to get back in the game. He specialized in targeting lone travelers on the street. If he could steal something, he would. If he couldn't, he'd make a scene. There were no cameras now anyway. As long as the soldiers didn't catch him in the act, they couldn't prove a thing. Sometimes, after the soldiers left, he'd even follow his target to try again. If stealing didn't work, he'd ambush them, kill them, and take everything they had. He wouldn't even leave their clothes. In the past few days, several people had already died by his knife. A cold glint flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. "What's going on?" the soldiers asked as they arrived. "Officer, he was trying to rob me." "Look, he's still holding my arm, and he's got a knife." Sun Tong Wen feigned terror, pointing an accusing finger at Lin Shi. Seeing that familiar act, Lin Shi knew this wasn't his first time pulling a stunt like this. The soldier saw that Lin Shi was indeed holding the man's arm, but he didn't jump to conclusions. He asked Lin Shi, "Is that what happened?" Lin Shi narrowed his eyes. "He was trying to pickpocket me. I caught him." "Pickpocket you? I'm dressed this well and you think I'd steal from you? Look at your raggedy clothes. They don't even look warm. What could I possibly steal from you?" Sun Tongwen spat excitedly, his saliva flying everywhere. But he was secretly wondering why this guy, dressed so lightly, had such a warm hand. Was he a resident? Lin Shi glanced at the soldiers and let go. He didn't get anything. Sun Tongwen immediately looked smug. The soldier then asked Sun Tongwen, "You said he tried to rob you. Do you have any proof? He's carrying a knife. Isn't that proof enough?" Sun Tongwen pointed at the knife on Lin Shi's hip. The soldier fell silent. Everyone carried a knife these days. If that was the criteria, the Sha City prison would have been full long ago. "Without proof, all we can do is escort you home to ensure your safety," the soldier said to Sun Tongwen. Sun Tongwen reluctantly nodded. "All right." After speaking, he shot Lin Shi a fearless glance and mouthed the words, "Just you wait." Under his mask, Lin Shi smiled, his eyes turning ice cold. Anyone who knew him would know he was furious. "If there's nothing else, can I go now?" Lin Shi asked the soldier. The soldier nodded. Lin Shi put his hand in his pocket pretending to fish for something. Suddenly, something fell out. A piece of beef jerky landed with a thud on the white snow. This was something Lin Shi had made in his spare time at the safe house. He'd eat it whenever he didn't feel like cooking or going out. It was even sprinkled with some dried chili for flavor. Against the white snow, it looked incredibly tempting. The soldier and Sun Tongwen both looked down at the alluring piece of meat. The moment Sun Tongwen saw the jerky, his eyes were glued to it. He stared intently as Lin Shi picked it up and put it back in his pocket, drool practically streaming from his mouth. He hadn't eaten meat in over half a month. Lin Shi quickly pocketed the jerky and left without a second glance. Sun Tongwen walked with the soldier around a corner, then stopped. "Officer, that guy's gone. You don't need to take me home. I have to go to my second uncle's place. Thanks." With that, he ran off and disappeared. Just as Lin Shi reached the end of the street, he slowed his pace. After a short while, he felt a malicious gaze fixed on his back. A murderous glint flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. He took the bait. 2 minutes later, he turned into a small alley flanked by old, dilapidated houses. The malicious gaze quickly vanished. Lin Shi's eyes flickered as he continued walking. Another 2 minutes passed. Suddenly, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground echoed from behind him. Lin Shi turned around to see a human head. Sun Tongwen, who had been hiding around a corner in the alley, broke into a triumphant grin. He'd used this sneak attack countless times, and it always worked. The moment his target turned around, they were as good as dead. The instant Lin Shi turned, Sun Tongwen whipped out a sharp, snow-bright blade. With a face full of cruel viciousness, he lunged forward, aiming to stab Lin Shi right in the back. Sun Tongwen was confident. Even as he struck, he couldn't help but lick his lips, already imagining himself devouring his victim piece by piece. Unfortunately for him, he had picked the wrong target. Lin Shi had been waiting for him to show himself. Just as Sun Tongwen saw the tip of his blade about to pierce his fat sheep, his knife hand was suddenly caught in an iron grip. Somehow Lin Shi had already turned around and grabbed Sun Tongwen's wrist. With a powerful squeeze, a terrifying force crushed Sun Tongwen's wrist, deforming it instantly. The blade clattered to the ground. Sun Tongwen was about to let out a pig-like squeal of agony, but Lin Shi gave him no chance, smashing a fist into his face. Lin Shi's strength was terrifying now. The punch completely caved in Sun Tongwen's face, his nose bridge shattering inward. But even with such a severe injury, Sun Tongwen wasn't dead. He couldn't believe it. The man who was just a fat sheep in his eyes a moment ago had suddenly turned into a ferocious wolf. Just as Lin Shi was about to deliver another kick to the thug, a voice suddenly came from above. "Need a hand?" Startled, Lin Shi looked up. His gaze cut through the falling snowflakes to see a young man sitting on a rooftop. It was the same young man who had been in line in front of him that day. When did he get there? How did I not notice him at all? Lin Shi's eyes narrowed. At that exact moment, Sun Tongwen, who seemed to be on the verge of death at Lin Shi's feet, suddenly grabbed onto Lin Shi's leg before he could pull it back. Lin Shi's full attention was on the young man on the roof. Caught off guard, his body lurched forward. Sun Tongwen raised his uninjured hand and jabbed his fingers straight for Lin Shi's eyes. Lin Shi's pupils contracted, not because of Sun Tongwen's horrifying face, but because a man on the brink of death had suddenly unleashed such refined combat skills. There was only one explanation: Gene Lock. Was this a coincidence? Or at that moment, his first thought was that the young man on the roof had done it on purpose. If he hadn't spoken up, Lin Shi would have already crushed this thug's head. With no time to think, Lin Shi blocked the fingers jabbing at his eye. His palm was slashed by sharp nails. He rolled away, dodging Sun Tongwen's follow-up attack. The first time someone unlocks their gene lock, it only lasts for 3 seconds. He couldn't afford to fight an unknown enemy above, while also clashing head-on with someone who had just unlocked their genes. Lin Shi dodged and took 2 steps back. With one hand crippled, Sun Tongwen stood up to give chase. But just then, the gene lock's duration ended. He convulsed and collapsed again. Lin Shi looked up. The young man was no longer on the roof. Sun Tongwen lay motionless on the ground, dead. Lin Shi frowned. Without bothering to check for a pulse, he didn't hesitate to stomp on the thug's head. The already caved-in skull immediately shattered like a watermelon dropped on the ground. Lin Shi wiped the filthy brain matter off his boot in the snow. Without looking up at the roof again, he turned and left the alley. After Lin Shi left, a regretful clicking sound came from the rooftop. Tisk, tisk, tisk. So cautious. Not a shred of curiosity. How boring! The man on the roof held a sharp sword, his upper body tensed, ready to strike at any moment. It was a shame Lin Shi didn't come up. If he had, a killing blow that he had been saving for a long time would have been waiting for him. To think he could make me feel a sense of danger. Just who are you? Ki-yun smiled faintly, sheathed his sword, and with a few light steps across the roof, vanished without a trace. Lin Shi left the alley and found a building to climb. His gaze fell back to the spot on the roof where the young man had just appeared. Besides a few footprints, there was no one there. A glint flashed in Lin Shi's eyes as he recalled his last encounter with the young man. At the time, he just thought the guy seemed overly optimistic. The two had barely spoken and had no conflict. Could it really have been a coincidence? He remembered the vague feeling of being watched after he finished collecting supplies at Dongjiao Ridge. Lin Shi didn't think it was a coincidence. There weren't that many coincidences in this world. Most so-called coincidences were deliberately created by someone. I'll have to be more careful next time. Lin Shi climbed down from the roof and headed toward Liunan City. As dusk fell, Lin Shi finally made it back to the safe house just before it got completely dark. Today's haul was less than expected. In total, he had only collected about 30 kilograms of gold. He had just reached the mountaintop when Mo Wang sensed his presence and rushed over, bringing with him the stench of blood. Lin Shi caught the charging Mo Wang and looked him over. "You're hurt?" Mo Wang's fur was matted with blood, some of it already dried and caked. Upon closer inspection, he found that Mo Wang only had minor injuries. The blood wasn't his. Mo Wang licked his chops, a look of dissatisfaction on his face. Lin Shi chuckled. "Did you go hunting on the mountain today? Good. From now on, you can find your own food every day. It'll save the meat in my storage space." Mo Wang's appetite was growing, and Lin Shi himself was a bottomless pit now. The bit of meat in his storage space really wasn't enough for the two of them. Luckily, before the apocalypse, Lin Shi had already planned to hunt on the mountain for food. Lin Shi fetched a bucket of water and quickly gave Mo Wang a bath in the snow. After he was done, Mo Wang shook himself, sending a shower of white ice crystals everywhere. The water in the bucket had already frozen solid, trapping the scoop in a block of ice. Lin Shi laughed and scolded. "Next time, roll yourself clean in the snow before you come back. Mo Wang barked in response. It was unclear what Mo Wang had eaten out there today, because he barely touched his dinner that night. After dinner and a short rest, Lin Shi activated his gene lock again and took Mo Wang outside to train, not wasting any opportunity to grow stronger. Although it was night, Mo Wang could still clearly see Lin Shi's position in the dark, but Lin Shi couldn't. Without night vision equipment, he could only rely on sound to pinpoint Mo Wang's location. Fortunately, after unlocking his genes, his brain's ability to process sound for positioning was incredibly fast. It didn't matter that he couldn't see. Man and dog trained in the darkness. Lin Shi quickly realized that Mo Wang was exceptionally fierce today. He had even learned to faint. It seemed the decision to let him hunt on the mountain alone was the right one. More combat experience was helping him learn effectively. At the end of the training session, Lin Shi discovered that the duration of his gene lock had increased by another second. That was a pleasant surprise. The next day, at dawn, after practicing the life-nourishing art, man and dog went their separate ways again. Lin Shi continued to collect gold, while Mo Wang returned to the mountains. And so, half a month passed. For the next 2 weeks, Lin Shi went out to gather supplies whenever the weather was good. In that time, he collected over 100 kilograms of gold and various other rare metals and jewelry. The copy materials for his final upgrade were almost complete. Mo Wang spent the last half-month living like a wild animal in the mountains. He'd sleep in every morning, completely oblivious to the world. He always needed a recovery pill just to wake up. One time, it was pitch black and he still hadn't come home. Lin Shi was about to grab a flashlight and search the mountain for him, but luckily, Mo Wang returned just before he left. After a harsh scolding from Lin Shi, Mo Wang became much more obedient, often coming home early and waiting for Lin Shi at the door. Over the past half-month, Mo Wang had grown quite a bit larger. Lin Shi guessed he had eaten a lot of wild beasts or origin beasts, absorbing their origin power. The snowstorm arrived. Lin Shi wasn't idle either. He and Mo Wang chopped down trees and gathered firewood nearby. The cold snap, which had lasted for over a month, had killed nearly all the tropical plants in Sha City. The available trees weren't enough. Lin Shi chopped them into logs and stacked them against the wall. During this process, Lin Shi discovered Mo Wang's new skill, tree gnawing. With just a few bites, Mo Wang could chew through a medium-sized tree at an astonishing speed. Most of the smaller shrubs were already buried under the thick snow. The snow accumulation had slowed. At first, the snow was quite fresh, but as the top layer grew thicker, the bottom layer became more compressed. It was getting harder to chop wood. As a result, the snow kept getting deeper, but the rate of accumulation was no longer as fast as it was at the beginning. It now covered about 2 stories of a building. For the past half-month, Lin Shi had been diligently cultivating and honing his ability to voluntarily activate his gene lock. His days were packed from morning till night, incredibly fulfilling. The duration of his gene lock had increased from 1 second to 18 seconds. More importantly, he could now move normally after the gene lock ended, no longer affected by the after effects. One day, after a 2-day blizzard, a rare sunny day appeared. Although the sunlight wasn't warm enough, just feeling the sun was enough to lift one's spirits. Today, Lin Shi and Mo Wang went their separate ways as usual, one to the mountains, one to the city. Arriving in Liunan City, Lin Shi found a gold shop. Unfortunately, it had been completely looted. All that was left was shattered glass and empty displays. Looks like I'll have to try another place tomorrow, Lin Shi thought to himself. He left the gold shop and wandered through a few streets. Lin Shi suddenly noticed that there were far more survivors on the streets of Liunan today. They were all carrying a lot of belongings, moving in small, highly vigilant groups. It looked like they were preparing to move. Even the number of robbers who approached Lin Shi today was lower. When he encountered a lone robber, Lin Shi didn't kill him right away. Instead, he pressed a knife to the man's throat and asked, "What's been going on these past few days? Where are all these people going with their things?" The robber trembled. "Spare me, hero. I'll talk 2 days ago. A huge tiger suddenly appeared in the city. It's eaten a lot of people. No one dares to go out and look for supplies anymore. We heard Sha City has an army protecting civilians, so a lot of people want to go there. I was just trying to get a little something for myself. Please, spare my life." Having gotten the information he needed, Lin Shi slit the robber's throat. So, an origin beast has appeared. In fact, a few origin beasts had already appeared in Sha City. Lin Shi had heard about 3 of them in the past half-month. But thanks to the patrolling soldiers who eliminated them, survivor casualties were kept to a minimum. Just then, Lin Shi's hand twitched. He heard cries for help from a distance. Frowning, Lin Shi quickly moved toward the source of the sound. Liunan City's central square, once a bustling and prosperous place, was now covered in a blanket of white snow due to the severe frost, leaving only flat, open roads. The snow-covered ground was usually sparsely populated, but today it was bustling with activity. However, it was a chaotic kind of bustle. A giant white tiger had unexpectedly descended from the sky and was now in the middle of the vast square, letting out a deafening roar. The survivors passing through the square screamed in terror. "Run! Hide!" The tiger roared once more and immediately attacked the survivors in the square. A woman saw the tiger and her legs went weak. She collapsed to the ground in fear. She tried to crawl backward, but it was useless. The tiger's eyes locked onto her and it lunged, biting her head clean off. Fresh blood spurted from the headless body. The other survivors who witnessed the scene scattered in panic, running into the alleys. Some dropped everything, even their survival supplies, to flee. Some abandoned their wives and children. But how could their 2 legs compare to the speed of the mutated tiger? The fleeing people were still caught, torn apart one by one. The white square was instantly stained red with pools of blood. Panic and despair spread. Those further away who witnessed the horrifying scene immediately turned and ran. Lin Shi arrived at the edge of the square and saw the survivors fleeing for their lives. And the white tiger was ferociously tearing apart a still living man. The man's legs were already in the tiger's mouth, his upper body still outside. He was desperately crying for help. Seeing Lin Shi not running, a glimmer of hope appeared in the man's eyes. "Help, please, save me even at a time like this." The man still wanted to live. But a second later, the tiger flung the man into the air and then bit down on his chest. Crunch, crunch. Blood sprayed everywhere. The man was devoured in just a few bites. After finishing its meal, the tiger slowly turned its gaze toward Lin Shi. Lin Shi focused on the treasure, gathering basin's interface. A notification appeared. Level 2 origin beast detected within a 100-meter radius. Level 2. To think that just over a month after the apocalypse began, a level 2 origin beast had already appeared in the city. In his past life, it took several years for level 2 origin beasts to appear, and they were usually accompanied by a group of level 1 origin beasts. They could lead the beasts to form a small beast tide. This white tiger wasn't native to Non-Province, and it was alone. It was very likely that it had evolved from a nearby zoo and escaped. A level 2 origin beast could withstand damage from ordinary handgun bullets, and conventional blades had an even harder time piercing their thick hides. A look of anticipation flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. He raised his hand and took out the prepared crossbow from his storage space. He had a feeling that absorbing this level 2 origin beast would lead to a breakthrough in the origin power within his body. The tiger saw Lin Shi and suddenly charged at him. Its speed was so fast that it was in front of Lin Shi in the blink of an eye. But Lin Shi was not slow either. Before the giant tiger attacked, he leaped onto the roof of a 3-story shop along the square. Taking the high ground, Lin Shi aimed at the giant tiger below and quickly fired an arrow. Given the option of a ranged attack, Lin Shi naturally chose the safer and more energy-efficient method. Whoosh! The arrow cut through the air and struck the giant tiger's body, but it only went in halfway. The crossbow's damage was rather weak. The giant tiger let out a pained roar. But with its massive body, one arrow was clearly not enough to be fatal. It leaped toward Lin Shi's small building. While the tiger was still in midair, Lin Shi quickly reloaded and fired a second arrow. Without even waiting to see the result, he jumped down in another direction. His physical fitness was different now. Falling from a height of about 10 meters into the soft snow was not dangerous at all. Behind him, the giant tiger's furious roar echoed. A survivor who had fallen to the ground witnessed the tiger being hit by the arrow. He screamed, "Someone's hunting the tiger." The other survivors heard the shout and also turned back. It was unclear whether it was Lin Shi's aura that attracted the giant tiger, or if the 2 arrows had enraged it. Despite its injuries, the giant tiger still charged toward Lin Shi. He had just landed and hadn't had time to reload when he heard the wind whistling behind him. The crossbow was powerful but cumbersome. In front of so many people, he couldn't just pull things out of his storage space. Lin Shi tossed the crossbow aside, drew the handgun from his hip, turned, fired a shot, and then rolled to the side. Only then did Lin Shi see that the previous arrow had hit the giant tiger's left leg. Since he wanted to absorb this beast's origin power, Lin Shi had no intention of holding back. He struck decisively, aiming straight for the giant tiger's eye. Bang, bang, bang. 3 gunshots rang out. The giant tiger dodged 2 of the shots aimed at its eyes but was hit by the third. Blinded in one eye, the tiger became even more frenzied. It lunged in front of Lin Shi, opening its maw full of sharp fangs to bite down. In close combat with the beast, he had no advantage in size, speed, or strength. Lin Shi didn't hesitate to activate his gene lock. He deftly dodged the sharp teeth. A second later, he put his strength into a powerful punch to the giant tiger's side. The muscles in his arm bulged. The powerful blow knocked the giant tiger's head to the side. As its body staggered, Lin Shi took the opportunity to swing another fist, still aiming for its head. The head is the weak point of all creatures. A strong blow can cause dizziness or a concussion at best, and unconsciousness at worst. Still dazed, the tiger couldn't react before taking another punch. Pressing his advantage, Lin Shi rained down heavy blows on the giant tiger's head. From a distance, the fleeing people stopped to watch this terrifying scene. The crowd grew larger. "My God, is that a person?" someone whispered in disbelief. "I finally believe Wu Song could kill a tiger. This guy is even stronger," someone else shouted excitedly. Someone saw the crossbow, Lin Shi had thrown down, and a greedy, covetous look flashed in their eyes. Lin Shi continuously hammered the giant tiger's head, finally knocking it to the ground. At some point, the survivors had gathered and were cheering. Lin Shi only glanced at them before refocusing on the giant tiger. He knew this tiger wasn't dead, just knocked out. Lin Shi drew his dagger, lifted the giant tiger's eyelid, and stabbed it hard in the eye. The dagger sank deep to the hilt. The unconscious tiger suddenly thrashed violently, but as Lin Shi twisted the dagger, its struggles gradually weakened. At that moment, not far away, a man took advantage of Lin Shi being occupied with killing the tiger to sneak toward the spot where Lin Shi had thrown the crossbow. The man's eyes glinted with greed and bloodlust. He stared at the crossbow on the ground, thinking to himself, "If I get that crossbow, I can hunt some wild animals later. Wouldn't it be easy to get meat then?" But before he could touch it, Lin Shi pulled the dagger from the tiger's eye. With a flick of his wrist, the dagger shot out like a bullet, straight into the man's throat. The blade pierced through the back of his neck, its power even greater than a bullet's. The man's body went rigid. He clutched his throat, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. The others who had greedy intentions immediately reined them in, not daring to make a move. Even that mutated tiger was killed. Rushing up there would be no different from suicide. Lin Shi retrieved his dagger, wiped it on the snow, and sheathed it at his hip. He picked up the crossbow, disassembled it, and put it in his backpack. He pulled out the arrows. Looking at the tiger's corpse, Lin Shi glanced at the circle of survivors. The process of absorbing origin power could not be interrupted. He couldn't do it in front of everyone. Lin Shi decided to take the tiger's corpse with him first. A tiger this big had to weigh at least several hundred pounds. Lin Shi hoisted the tiger onto his left shoulder with ease. He walked up to the motionless crowd of survivors. He barked, "Move!" The survivors parted to either side. An old man remained standing, his eyes greedily fixed on the tiger on Lin Shi's shoulder. "Kid, a tiger this big, you can't eat it all by yourself. Can you give us a little? I can see you're not a selfish person, so see it through to the end. Since you saved us, give us some meat to eat." This statement successfully rallied all the survivors to confront Lin Shi. That's right. A tiger this big, if divided among them, would give everyone a decent amount of meat. The survivors' eyes burned as they stared at the tiger. Some had even started reaching for their weapons. They had forgotten that if Lin Shi hadn't appeared, they would likely all be dead. Even though Lin Shi hadn't acted to save them, the fact that they were saved was undeniable. Lin Shi sneered. Sorry, he had no morals, so he couldn't be guilt-tripped. A flash of cold light. The old man who was still standing in front of Lin Shi, his head was already rolling on the ground. There was no room for hesitation at a time like this. Otherwise, these survivors would swarm him like a pack of dogs. He understood the mentality of these survivors all too well. Lin Shi, radiating a murderous aura, swept his gaze around. "Anyone else want some? I'll send you to meet this tiger." Seeing this, the survivors shook their heads and backed away, afraid of following in the old man's footsteps. Lin Shi, carrying his blood-soaked knife, walked step by step between the two rows of survivors. After he was far away, someone in the crowd of survivors spoke to a scrawny man with dyed yellow hair and a mask. "Brother Huang, that kid, he looks like the target Mr. Li told us to take care of. Why didn't we make a move just now?" Huang Mao looked at his subordinate like he was an idiot. "It's the end of the world. Who gives a damn about a mission anymore? You think Mr. Li can even make it over here? Let's follow them and see if we can get some meat. Brother Huang is wise." A few of Huang Mao's underlings followed him in the direction Lin Shi had left. Lin Shi walked out of the square and into a deserted shop. Only then did he put the tiger into his storage space. Then he took out a large saber and sat in the shop, wiping the blade clean. The saber was straight, a meter long, with a thick yet narrow blade. It was sharp, like a straight dao, too rigid, easy to break. This saber wasn't suitable for killing origin beasts, but it was excellent for killing people. Just as he finished cleaning it, the sound of soft footsteps came from outside the shop. They came for the tiger, and there were quite a few of them. A burly, square-faced man and an ugly man walked up to the shop. They glanced around but didn't see the giant tiger. Their eyes focused on Lin Shi. "Brother, we don't need much. Just give us a leg, and we'll leave." Lin Shi smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You want my things? Take them with your own strength." The two men exchanged a look. One of them pulled a pistol from his belt. "I advise you not to be stubborn." Lin Shi didn't want to hear anymore. With a flick of his hand, a shard of glass shot out like a bullet and hit the gunman's forehead. The glass shard embedded itself deep between his eyebrows. The man collapsed, his gun falling with him. The ugly man was terrified and was about to beg for mercy, but he quickly followed his companion. Lin Shi stood up. "Humph," he said to the outside of the shop. "Since you're here, come on in together." As soon as he finished speaking, the 10 or so people who had been hiding and observing in the shadows appeared. "Don't be afraid, no matter how strong he is. He's just one person. Let's get him together." The survivors, holding homemade weapons, rushed into the shop. Just a few minutes later, the shop was filled with corpses. Lin Shi put a slash in each corpse, beheading them before leaving the shop from the back. Outside the shop, Huang Mao hesitated, watching the group rush in without seeing them come out. The small shop was like a bottomless abyss, waiting to swallow them whole. "But Brother Huang, should we just leave?" one of his lackeys said. "Let's go take a look." Huang Mao swallowed hard and led his men cautiously to the shop. Seeing the corpses and the heads with their eyes wide open in death, Huang Mao felt a chill run from his feet to the top of his head. He stumbled back 2 steps and fell to the ground with a thud. The others weren't any better, nearly pissing their pants in fear. "But Brother Huang, let's go. Please?" "Go where? Let's get out of here." Lin Shi used his snowmobile to get back to Shaw City in the afternoon. To his surprise, Shaw City wasn't peaceful either. As soon as he reached Shijiao, Lin Shi saw a crowd of people surrounding a wild boar, shouting and yelling. Lin Shi glanced over and saw that the boar was of normal size. It was probably just a regular wild boar that had run down from the mountains, not an origin beast. 3 people were already on the snow, groaning in pain, but that didn't dampen the hunters' enthusiasm. All they could see was meat. Recently, wild beasts and origin beasts had been appearing more and more frequently. Lin Shi knew what that meant. Wild beasts running down the mountain meant there was a greater danger up there. It also meant that origin beasts from deep in the mountains or elsewhere would soon come down to hunt people. The beast tide is coming. Bodies will fall everywhere. For the survivors, opportunities like this to openly search for supplies were numbered. This world would increasingly value strength. Lin Shi's eyes were resolute. He had to get stronger, fast. When Lin Shi returned to the safe shelter, Mo Wang wasn't back yet. He took the large tiger corpse out of his storage space and placed it in the warehouse. He placed his hand on the tiger's body and looked at the treasure-gathering basin's notification. Unclaimed origin power detected. Absorb? Without hesitation, he said, "Yes." As soon as he said it, Lin Shi felt the origin power flowing from his arm into his body again. This time, the sensation was much clearer than the previous 2 times. The arm in contact with the tiger began to heat up. The origin power was like a hot spring, converging in his body and merging with his own origin power. As this energy flowed in through his arm, Lin Shi's body temperature suddenly rose. A wave of heat radiated from him. Lin Shi had taken off his coat when he entered the safe room. Now, sweat poured from every pore on his body. Along with the sweat came some grayish-brown impurities. Immediately after, an unprecedented sense of power filled his entire body. A glint flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. Gene lock, open, control origin power. This time, the gene lock opened faster than before. Almost as soon as he thought it, a force stronger than before surged from within his body. Lin Shi took out a steel bar the thickness of a person's arm from his storage space, grabbed both ends, and easily twisted it into the shape of a pretzel. The giant tiger weighed several hundred pounds, and now he could easily lift it with one hand. If he were to fight that giant tiger again now, Lin Shi was confident he could knock it out with a single punch. What surprised Lin Shi the most was that this time, the gene lock's duration lasted for 32 seconds. As the saying goes, in a battle between masters, victory is decided in an instant. An extra second is a huge advantage. At his current gene lock speed, he could do a lot in 32 seconds. Before he could celebrate, the treasure-gathering basin suddenly sounded an alarm. Level 2 origin beast detected within a 100-meter radius. Lin Shi thought to himself, "Perfect. I can test my strength on this origin beast." He shot out the door like a gust of wind and saw Mo Wang with something in his mouth, his eyes wide. Man and dog were both stunned. "Mo Wang?" Lin Shi looked around but saw no other animals. "It's you again, you idiot." Moang dropped what was in his mouth. It turned out to be a green fruit. Ignoring the fruit, Lin Shi grabbed Moang's head and examined him closely. Evolved, his body was indeed larger than it was this morning. Lin Shi observed him carefully and found that Moang's eyes had also changed slightly. The pupils, which were once one blue and one pink, were now darker and had human-like irises. His teeth and claws were also sharper. Moang was being inspected like livestock, whining and rubbing against him, unable to bear it any longer. After checking Moang, Lin Shi finally noticed the green fruit on the ground. Where did this come from? At the mention of the fruit, Moang excitedly stood up, pointed at the fruit with his paw, and then pointed to his own mouth. You're saying you ate this fruit? Lin Shi understood Moang's meaning. Moang looked smug, holding his head high. And then you evolved? Lin Shi frowned. Moang nodded, his eyes full of satisfaction with Lin Shi's analytical skills. The fruit was freshly picked, the stem still fresh. A thought flashed in Lin Shi's mind. He picked up the fruit. As soon as Lin Shi picked it up, the treasure-gathering basin suddenly announced, "Origin fruit detected. Recommended for consumption." Lin Shi looked at the fruit, still covered in Moang's saliva, and his heart stirred. It was a mutated plant. Sha City was originally a tropical region. Almost no plants had survived. He never expected that 1 in a million plants would survive and evolve. Mutated plants were different from animals. Mutation didn't mean they would move. A plant was still a plant. Even if it mutated, it wouldn't grow a brain, arms, or legs. But after mutation, some plants became extremely cold-resistant and resilient, or they became incredibly tough, so much so that even origin beasts had a hard time biting through them. Or they contained deadly poison, and the kind that could bear fruit was extremely rare and precious. In his past life, there was official news that if you found a mutated plant and turned it over to the government, you would be handsomely rewarded. And if you found a mutated plant that could bear fruit, not only would you get a huge reward, you could even get a lucrative position in the underground organization and become a leader. So it's because the fruit contains origin power. Lin Shi took out a water bottle, washed Moang's saliva off the fruit, and took a small bite. In this weather, the fruit wasn't frozen. It was still soft and juicy inside. The fruit was sweet and crisp, like a green apple, but 10 times more delicious. As it went down, his stomach felt warm, and the warmth spread throughout his body. It was origin power. Lin Shi finished the fruit and looked at Moang eagerly. Where did you get it? Take me there. Moang seemed to have been waiting for these words. He ran forward 2 steps, then came back to Lin Shi. Lie down. Moang lay down, his head reaching Lin Shi's waist. Lin Shi was confused. Why aren't you going? Moang stood up, looked at Lin Shi, and then lay down again, gesturing with his head. You want me to ride on your back? Lin Shi guessed. Moang nodded. Lin Shi was a little excited. He wondered if other boys dreamed of riding beasts like in cartoons when they were little. He certainly did. As a child, Lin Shi greatly admired the characters who rode beasts in cartoons. He even begged his father to let him learn to ride a horse. For a time, he loved horseback riding and wanted to gallop across the grasslands, but his father firmly refused to let him go to another province. Lin Shi carefully got on Moang's back, suppressing his excitement. Moang, on my command. Gallop. Lin Shi held on tightly to the fur on Moang's neck to keep from falling off. The scenery flew by. All he could hear was the howling wind. Moang was incredibly fast and didn't need a road. He ran on the snow, through withered forests, leaped over small streams and lakes, and only stopped by a frozen waterfall when it got dark. This is it! Lin Shi jumped off Moang's back. Moang glanced at Lin Shi and walked toward the waterfall. Lin Shi followed. The frozen waterfall was hung with large and small icicles, intricately intertwined. As Lin Shi got closer, he noticed something unusual. There was a cave under the waterfall, looking like it had been dug out. Moang went into the cave first, leaving Lin Shi to wait outside. The cave entrance was previously hidden by the waterfall, and after it froze, it was covered by a thick layer of ice, making it very difficult to spot. Lin Shi went to the cave entrance and looked at Moang with a puzzled expression. How did you find this place? What has this guy been doing in the mountains all day? Moang raised his head, snorted, and with a proud look, gestured for Lin Shi to follow. Because it was already dark, the cave was pitch black. Lin Shi took out a headlamp and put it on, following carefully. The ground had no snow, only smooth, slippery rock, but the cave wasn't deep. After about 10 meters, there was light ahead. Lin Shi followed Moang to a small cavern. When he saw the scene inside, his eyes showed a look of astonishment. The cavern was quite high, with cliffs on both sides. At the top was a small opening, with a large rock lying across it. A faint light shone down from the crack in the rock. At the bottom of the cavern was a lake, but it was frozen. In the middle of the lake was a pile of rocks protruding from the water. A strangely shaped tree grew on the pile of rocks in the middle of the lake. The faint light scattered on the tree, creating a very strange scene. Lin Shi felt like he had entered some kind of Xiangxia scene. The trunk was twisted, as thick as a tree trunk, and grayish-black. The roots were embedded in the rock crevices, extremely tangled. Many branches and purple-green leaves formed a large purple-green canopy. The tree was about 5 or 6 meters tall. Just looking at it, you could feel its strong vitality. On the tree were green fruits, the same kind Mo Wang had brought back. At the base of the tree, a large snake with its belly cut open lay motionless. Mo Wang saw the snake's corpse, flung it onto the lake surface with a flick of his paw, and then pointed up at the tree with his claw. Lin Shi went closer to examine the snake. This snake was about 3 meters long, as thick as an adult's calf. Its whole body had a purple-green pattern similar to the tree. The snake's body was almost torn apart, and its face was gone. Looking at the bite marks on the snake's body, Lin Shi knew immediately that Mo Wang had killed it. "This is a venomous snake." He looked at Mo Wang. Mo Wang licked his lips and whimpered softly. "Don't eat random things next time," Lin Shi sighed. What if this thing was poisonous? Seeing that Mo Wang was still healthy proved that at least the snake wasn't poisonous on the outside. From its unprecedented shape and color, Lin Shi judged that this snake had mutated. Normal cold-blooded animals would have a hard time surviving in this temperature. Perhaps it was thanks to that tree. But when he got close to the snake's body, the treasure-gathering basin didn't report any origin power. Lin Shi tried placing his hand on the snake's body, but there was still no response. Could the origin power of this snake be in its gallbladder, which Mo Wang had already eaten? Or had the origin beast been dead for too long, causing the power to dissipate? Lin Shi thought to himself. In fact, he had always had a question in his mind. Humans and beasts are both animals, so why are their evolutionary paths different? Previously, researchers had proven that humans could hardly absorb origin power on their own like plants and animals. It was as if humans were not native animals to this planet. Regarding the origin of the human species, scientific history has always been debated. There is no evidence to prove that humans evolved from apes. Darwin's theory of evolution is just a hypothesis. Pushing aside the bold speculations in his mind, Lin Shi walked toward the tree. Mo Wang paced back and forth under the tree. He had been waiting for a long time. Getting closer, Lin Shi saw Mo Wang's teeth marks on the tree branches. With Mo Wang's temperament, he wouldn't be surprised if he had gnawed the whole tree down. But now he had only gnawed a few fruits for him to pick. It showed how hard this tree was. He picked a fruit and gave it to Mo Wang. Mo Wang wagged his tail, happily accepted it, then put it on the ground and continued to look at Lin Shi. This guy is getting smarter and smarter. Lin Shi patted his head and climbed the tree. When his body touched the tree trunk, the treasure-gathering basin displayed a reminder. This plant contains a large amount of origin power. Absorb? Yes. Lin Shi raised an eyebrow, not very surprised. The treasure-gathering basin absorbing origin power was nothing new. Lin Shi continued to pick the fruits. A moment later, when he came down from the tree, there were more than 10 green fruits in his storage space. Confirming that there were no more fruits on the tree, Lin Shi said to Mo Wang, "Don't let anything disturb me." Mo Wang immediately stood up straight and paced back and forth in the cave. Lin Shi placed his hand on a tree branch, looked at the treasure-gathering basin's interface and said, "Absorb. High City, Chen Family Manor." Chen Fanren was preparing to rest when he sat on the edge of his bed, frowning as he listened to his subordinate Wang Zi's report. "Old Ba, those cops still refuse to cooperate with us. Should we?" Wang Zi probed. He made a throat-slitting gesture. Chen Fanren stood up and paced around the room. The conflict with the official forces began when Lin Shi killed Chen Jinbin and 3 guards at the hospital. At that time, after killing Chen Jinbin's guards, Lin Shi didn't take their guns. He thought it would only cause a little trouble for Chen Fanren. But Lin Shi didn't expect that this would cause not just a little trouble, but a huge one. In his past life, after the apocalypse began, Chen Fanren relied on his years of establishment in High City, his extensive network of connections, and his good reputation. From the very beginning of the apocalypse, he cooperated with the government, mobilizing countless resources and manpower. This consolidated the Chen family's position in High City, and he gradually absorbed the official forces of High City, becoming the uncrowned king of the city. But in this life, just because of Lin Shi's careless action, the police found the guns on Chen Fanren's guards. Chen Fanren was placed under key investigation by the High City Public Security Bureau even before the apocalypse began. After that, communication was cut off. Chen Fanren didn't receive any information. Then he discovered his villa was surrounded by a team of special police. They found a lot of contraband. Chen Fanren was taken away directly from the villa by the special police. Luckily, the apocalypse happened. Otherwise, it would have been more than Chen Fanren could handle. After that, looting and killing broke out all over Hay City. Chen Fanrin's subordinates took advantage of the chaos to rescue him from custody. He returned to the villa, recruited more men, and confronted the official forces. Then, he repaired the villa and took in refugees. Amidst the collapse of order and the rise of crime, the official forces of High City temporarily let him off the hook. The official forces of High City were led by the director of the Hay City Public Security Bureau, along with police officers, special police, firefighters, and other government employees. These days, Chen Fanrin still wanted to negotiate a cooperation with the High City government, but he repeatedly failed. The person who was once his strongest supporter had now become the biggest obstacle to his rule over Hay City. Chen Fanrin frowned, not answering Wang Ji immediately. Instead, he asked, "How is the investigation I asked you to do?" Wang Ji replied, "You asked me to investigate the unusually large beasts that have been appearing in the city recently. I found out that these beasts are not entirely from the mountains, they are fleeing from the north. I asked a zoologist, and he said it might be because the temperature in the north is very low now, and they can't survive, so they left the north and fled here." At this point, Wang Ji looked at Chen Fanrin and said, "Furthermore, he said that the ones appearing in High City now are mainly vanguard beasts, the kind that run fast. There might be a large herd of beasts behind them." More bad news. Recently, dozens of origin beasts and over 100 wild beasts had appeared in High City, causing massive casualties. Normal wild beasts were fine, but those large beasts required heavy firepower to be eliminated. If the number of wild beasts continued to increase, and without official ammunition support, their ammunition reserves would definitely not be enough. And if they ran out of ammunition, Chen Fanrin's current position in Hay City would be in grave danger. Chen Fanrin frowned. "Any news from the people I sent to the north to investigate?" "None. Currently, none of the people we sent to the north to investigate have returned," Wang Ji replied. "Since the solar storm erupted, the Earth's magnetic field has been unstable, and radio waves cannot be transmitted. The biological research lab that Chen Fanrin built in the north, now with transportation paralyzed, was completely out of contact. Even the medicines he had researched before the apocalypse couldn't be retrieved." Chen Fanrin's expression could no longer be described as just ugly. He closed his eyes, and after a long time, he opened them and said, "Pay attention to the wild beast situation in the next few days. Have our subordinates gather some supplies. Be prepared to withdraw from High City at any time. As for Pan Jiangguo and those people, leave them for now." Pan Jiangguo was the current leader of the official forces in High City. Hearing this, Wang Zi's eyes lit up. He replied, "Yes." Chen Fanrin's room had excellent soundproofing. While Chen Fanrin and Wang Zi were talking, two women were arguing fiercely outside his door. One of them was Lu Xiyue. With Chen Fanrin's status, he could have any woman, no matter how beautiful. The more he couldn't have something, the more he wanted it. Lu Xiyue was like that at first. He saw her in a crowd and was attracted by her noble temperament. Then he found out she was married, so he conspired to harm Lin Shi's father, using any means necessary to get Lu Xiyue. And Lu Xiyue was very smart. She knew how to capture a man's heart. She not only knew how to please him, but also how to increase her own value in Chen Fanrin's eyes. She knew that a man who had put a lot of effort into something would not easily let it go. Therefore, after being with Chen Fanrin, she constantly made him spend energy and money on her. She even received shares in Chen Fanrin's new energy company. At first, this good life lasted for a long time. In her past life, even though Chen Fanrin found many other women later, Lu Xiyue always held an irreplaceable position in his heart. But in this life, there was the matter of Lin Shi killing Chen Jinbin. This caused Chen Fanrin to suspect and grow cold toward Lu Xiyue. At the same time, he found a new pleasure. At this moment, opposite Lu Xiyue was another woman. She had a beautiful figure, spring-like hair, and exquisite features, her temperament completely opposite to Lu Xiyue's. That was Hua Lingqiao, Chen Fanrin's new lover, a famous movie star before. "Miss Lu, that flower has already withered. Why are you still here? Trying to make others uncomfortable?" Hua Lingqiao caressed her hair. She said coquettishly. Lu Xiyue sneered, her eyes cold. "This isn't a place where you can do whatever you want. Fanrin likes you now, but it's just a fleeting interest." Hua Lingqiao rolled her eyes. "At least I'm still fresh. Unlike some people, who are not only old, but also smelly." As she spoke, she even held her nose and looked at Lu Xiyue, as if she had an unpleasant smell. Lu Xiyue's face turned pale. Before she could retort, the sound of chaos and gunshots erupted from outside the manor.
"What's going on?" A wolf pack stopped them. Quickly help over 100 giant wolves formed a pack and stormed the manor. Unlike the scattered beasts that had appeared in the city before,
This wolf pack had likely smelled the thick scent of blood in the manor and charged straight here. The 3-meter-high wall, newly built to block the cold wind outside the manor, was easily overcome by the giant wolves. The manor's patrol team couldn't withstand the attack of hundreds of ferocious giant wolves. A pack leader, significantly larger than the others, crowded with the other wolves, filling the wall. With a single swipe, the tens of centimeters thick concrete wall was punched through, revealing the inside and terrifying the survivors. One was torn apart, its belly ripped open. Looking out from the corridor window, Lu Siyue and Hua Lingqiao glanced at each other, both seeing the fear in the other's eyes. At that moment, the door at the end of the corridor opened. Chen Fanren and Wang Ji came out, running quickly toward the stairs. Lu Siyue and Hua Lingqiao hurriedly followed. Chen Fanren and Wang Ji ran very fast. Hua Lingqiao ran and shouted, "Honey, wait for me!" But Chen Fanren seemed not to hear, not even slowing down. With the sound of shattering glass, a giant wolf appeared in front of Hua Lingqiao and Lu Siyue. Both women screamed in terror. Just as the giant wolf lunged, Lu Siyue grabbed Hua Lingqiao's hair. Amidst her screams, she pushed her toward the attacking wolf. She herself ran like the wind toward where Chen Fanren was heading. Finally, at the last moment, she reached Chen Fanren, who was opening the basement door. "Jinbin, I want to be with you forever," Lu Siyue said, her eyes welling with tears. It was unclear whether it was excellent acting or extreme fear. Chen Fanren looked at her, and in the end, he escaped into the basement with Lu Siyue. All night, the manor was a scene of bloody carnage. The next morning, when the three of them came out of the basement, the wolf pack had retreated. The manor was completely devastated. Blood and corpses were everywhere. Not a single survivor was left. Chen Fanren looked at the shelter he had worked so hard to build, now destroyed, and nearly fainted on the spot. After calming down, Chen Fanren made a decision. He said to Wang Ji, "See how many survivors are left from yesterday. Gather them. We don't need the others. Get the snowmobiles I told you to fix last time. Take whatever we can carry. We're going south."